You can't answer the points I'm putting to you. You're going around in circles and then getting nasty and shouting and threatening to beat me up on air, all of which I think you'll find is against Ofcom rules.
No,
you
it's
might
not.
find yourself subject to disciplinary action.
I can beat you up during the break, and they won't know about it. How about that?
Oh, that's still in the studio, mate. That's
I'll take you outside of the studio, and it's not under Ofcom rules.
No.
I'll drag you down the stairs, and I'll take you in the street, and I'll kick you around for a couple of minutes, and then I'll come back and do the show on my own.
See, such a
How about that?
Such a violent streak.
Yeah, I've got a violent streak, so don't mess with me. This is TalkSport. We are the two Mikes, and I'm delighted to say on a very, very interesting Friday morning, it's time to say a very good morning to Mr. Mike, a Porky Parry. Very good morning to Mr. Parry.
And a very good morning to you, Mike. And I have to say, my admiration for Ronald Koeman just grows and grows.
Ronald Koeman?
What a terrific
I thought you were
guy.
going to say your admiration for me, funnily enough.
No. I don't have much admiration for you. It's limited. I know
that's
after
disappointing. After
knowing
all
you
these
for more than
years.
30 years, that most of what you see in you is a facade.
Really?
No,
facade?
Ronald. Yeah.
That's a bit harsh.
No.
You're accusing me of having a sort of a fakery thing going on.
Yeah, that's right. You're smoke and mirrors. You always have been.
Smoke and mirrors. I've just given up smoking.
Yeah, well, I don't mean that sort of smoking. I mean...
I wish you'd explain this. I don't think we could carry on this show unless you are more specific about what it is that you have a problem with.
Well, I think your life is made up of a series of tragedies, accidents, blunders.
Really? I'll tell you what, it's pretty tragic when I met back up with you after so many years of not talking to you.
And corrections and all that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? But there's no need to bore the audience with that. On the Koeman
maybe
front,
come back to that.
Yeah, on the Koeman front, because of course...
Yeah, you see his dream job is to go and be manager of Barcelona.
I do indeed, and that's why I admire him. Fantastic. I wouldn't want a manager at Everton who was content to say, I'm going to stay here for the rest of my life. The next 20 years, I'm going to be at Everton. I need a man...
You just want Everton to be a staging post, then?
Not at all. I want Everton to be run by a man who says, my ultimate job is to run, perhaps the biggest and most famous football club in the world, Barcelona.
Barcelona isn't, is it? Manchester United is the biggest and most famous club in the world.
It's Barcelona, and...
What would you say if he said, I want to run the biggest and most famous club in the world, Manchester United?
Well, he hasn't said that, so that's very hypothetical, isn't it?
Well, it is.
But he has a connection with Barcelona, which you can accept.
Well, I've been telling you this for months. You're now finally coming around to my way of thinking.
Not at all. What I'm saying is that I would not want a manager at Everton who had no ambition to improve himself even further, and whatever you say, à ce moment...
Yes.
Barcelona is a bigger club than Everton.
Barcelona is.
And so he can move on from Everton when he's made Everton a top four club in this country and put us back on the path where we belong amongst the elite in this country. We'd say, thank you very much. Give him a round of applause. Am I go to Barcelona.
Am I correct at the moment in saying that Everton have qualified for the Europa League?
Yes.
So will you be charging yourself and charging your glass, as it were, for next season's Europa League efforts? Because you previously said this is a dumb competition for dumb teams and a complete and utter waste of time.
I think Jose's been absolutely right in seeing it as a priority for the season. Once he realised they couldn't probably get into the top four,
and
it looks like he's going to make it.
Well, now that there's a Champions League place to be had,
it looks like he's going to make it.
As I've been telling you for the whole season, it is obviously worth playing it.
Celta Vigo didn't really belong on the same pitch as Manchester United, so
they only lost 1-0 though.
Yeah, but it should have been 2 or 3, really, shouldn't it?
It should have been.
And so go back to Old Trafford. So they get through to the final. Then the final. Where's the final, by the way?
The final of the Europa League.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either because it doesn't generate that much interest.
I presume it would not be. One of the we argued about the stadium size last night of the Millennium Stadium, or the Principality Stadium, as it's now called. I seem to remember last year there was a big row about the tiny nature of the Europa League final venue because it wasn't big enough to even have all the fans in it.
When I told you about PSV Eindhoven. That was a 40,000-seater stadium for the final of the UEFA Cup. Middlesbrough were in it. They got beaten 4-0. And that couldn't even accommodate the Middlesbrough fans who wanted to go there and watch
because,
that team in
UEFA
Europe.
still take the same number of
freeloaders
as they do for the Champions League final.
They certainly do. I mean, depending on what sort of working pattern we have next season, I'd like to get back into Europe with Everton.
I can tell you where it is. It's in the Friends Arena in Stockholm.
Stockholm.
Like
Stockholm, Sweden, Svenska. Sweden's good country, it's got good people and
they don't talk like the Dutch,
very good looking.
But they don't talk like the Dutch.
They're all kind of the same sort of vernacular.
You think the Dutch and the Swedish are in some way related?
They're all continental.
Well, you say that, but actually they are completely ethnically different.
But anyway, listen, so I think it's excellent that Mr. Koeman has made the position absolutely clear, and I have no fear or favour about a man saying, I want to improve myself. Good, I'm glad you're in charge of Everton.
The big question
you want to improve yourself further.
And we'll listen to what he said, because we have some audio, I believe, of him saying it.
Yes.
But what I would put to you is this, because we see in the past that people tend to repeat patterns of behaviour, right? As you have done in many ways, as you accused me of doing. Yes. Ronald Koeman said that he wasn't going to leave Southampton because he was working on a project there. And then he got a job offer from Everton, and he left. Now, he says at the moment he doesn't want to leave Everton because he'd like to stay to the end of his contract.
He's going to, till 2019.
Well, let's hear what he says.
I mentioned several times that I think it's human ambition, and that means for players, that means for managers, and that's not changing my position or my contract with Everton. I'm really happy to be in Everton. I'm looking forward for next season. It's a big project, and I will be part of that project. The interview is coming out of 25 years ago that we won the title in Wembley. Okay, and then it's normal that they will ask me questions about the Barcelona job, but there's no chance that I will leave Everton before the end of my contract.
So, sorry, what's unclear about that?
There is everything unclear about it, because whenever you start talking about something like leaving, then clearly people don't always do what they say they're going to do.
Well, hang on, he was asked a question.
Yes, how many times have you heard managers saying, I am definitely not leaving, and then they leave?
He'd given... Well, that's irrelevant.
Well, it's not.
It is. It's hypothetical and irrelevant.
Totally relevant. I wonder if we can find the audio of him saying exactly the same thing to Southampton fans and players, and then leaving.
He gave an interview to a magazine which is very influential in the Barcelona region, you know?
Yes.
The Basque region, is that?
That is the Basque region.
You sure?
No, it's not Catalan region.
Exactly, the Catalan region. So he caught you out there, didn't
I?
No,
he didn't.
The Catalan region.
I was just nodding and go along with you.
And they,
What's the name of the magazine? I'll see if I can find it.
It sounds like Marca, but it's not Marca, because Marca's Real Madrid.
Marca's the Real Madrid.
Yeah,
one.
Exactly. But it's the Marca equivalent, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
would you believe it's called Sport?
Sport. Yeah?
Yeah.
S-P-O-R-T.
S-P-O-R-T.
It's a good magazine.
And the headline says, Sueña con entrenar algún día al Barça.
Yeah, my dream is to go back to Barcelona.
Yeah.
Well, what's wrong with that? He's a legend of Barcelona. He scored the goal that gave Barcelona their first ever European Cup.
I'll tell you what's wrong with it.
Under the legendary Cruyff.
Johan Cruyff.
Johan Cruyff.
What is wrong with it, right, is that I've been telling you this for about the best part, I would say, of the last 6 months.
But I've never...
You have consistently denied that Ronald Koeman will go to Barcelona.
I haven't.
You have absolutely poo-pooed the story, told me that I was making it up, said I had no independent sources of my own, which I kept telling you I did, and the story will not go away. But I keep saying to you, he is going to Barcelona, and he will go before you think he's going to go.
You've totally bent the facts.
Not true.
You have.
No. God bless you.
Excuse me, I've got hay fever.
Have you?
It came on today very badly.
Really?
Yeah. I'll tell you why you've totally bent the facts.
Take some allergy medicine.
I'll tell you why you've totally bent the facts, Mr.
Really?
Leatherface.
Well, you're the expert at bending facts.
You have totally bent the facts because everything you've just said is untrue because I have never denied he would go to Barcelona.
Of course you have.
What I've denied, no, just let me tell the truth. What I've denied,
time for everything.
What I've denied is that he's going to Barcelona this summer, which you've tried to consistently tell our audience, which is hogwash, garbage, drivel, piffle,
really,
and
what else?
And a load of Gorgonzola.
Gorgonzola.
Yeah,
okay. You may well be able to hang on to him for one more season.
No, well,
it's very possible.
All you've ever said is, he's off to Barcelona in the summer.
I believe
you've never said he's off to Barcelona after 2019 because you didn't know his contract went to 2019.
I'm not talking about.
You make it up as you go along.
Listen, if you want to start accusing me of making stories up, let's start with some home truths from you.
Yes.
How old are you?
Nobody needs to know.
Right. So you won't already put the truth right out there.
What do you mean?
So you don't know what the truth is? Your relationship with the truth is incredibly
It has no relevance
tenuous.
To the output of this show.
You don't know what the truth is.
No relevance at all.
You can't handle the truth. The truth is that Ronald Koeman is going to Barcelona. That is the truth. The question of when he goes to Barcelona is the only thing that's up for debate.
They're both wrong statements. You don't know that Ronald Koeman is going to Barcelona. Supposing
definitely going.
What a silly statement, because if a better candidate comes along who has won successive European trophies, the Barcelona board, El Presidente, will take that man. He won't take Ronald Koeman,
yeah, but isn't it a
who hasn't,
statement?
as a manager, won trophies.
Isn't it a sillier statement to deny the absolute obvious fact, which is that Ronald Koeman has a connection to Barcelona?
I've never denied that. I've always built that up.
Well, you're doing it now.
I've just built it up.
He said that it's his dream job to go back to Barcelona.
Good.
From his own mouth.
Yeah,
his own words, right?
Good, and I admire him for that.
Is it not
we should all have a dream. What's your ambition?
Is it not
What's
more
your dream
foolish?
job?
My dream job?
Yeah, what's your dream job?
I don't really have a dream job.
See, you've got no ambition.
I have
Do you know
plenty of
why?
ambition.
You flatten your face, all the time.
Why?
You just stumble around in life until somebody comes along, gives you another, crutch to lean on. You know what I mean?
Like what?
That's all you do. And then sometimes, you get a slight burst of energy, lasts about 5 days, and then, boom, you're back into the routine of, easy as she goes, steady as she goes.
So what's your
steady
what's
as she
your
goes
point?
could be your motive
You've
for life.
started off this show by insulting me now twice. I'm going to come over there in 1 second flat. If you don't shut up, I'm going to beat the hell out of you. Do you understand me?
Really?
Do you understand me?
That's the resort.
Do you understand me?
The resort of the villain.
Just say yes and we'll move on.
No, I'm not saying yes to anything.
Right. Well, I have a long break here because I may need some time to slap him around. This is Talk Sport. This is Talk Sport. We are the two mics, and we've had a little conversation. I do quite like that. Steady She Goes. Yeah.
You see, even the production outfit here who support this show and make it sing have realised that when I say, your attitude to life is steady as she goes.
Well, it's just as well that one of us has that
attitude. They've
attitude.
played a record to endorse that.
Is it not the case that if one of us did not have a steady as she goes attitude, then we would be all over the place? Because the trouble with you, right, is your career is like one of those speedboats that speeds up and slows down about every 5 minutes because it doesn't have anything like a steady as she goes attitude.
No, because
you go reasonably well for a while, then you go mad for a while, then you come back to normal for a bit, and then you get fired, and then you come back again, and then you go quiet again, and then you go noisy again, and being with you is like being with an incredibly overactive child with an overactive thyroid gland. Yeah, I know about these things, and so I have to keep it all calm. All right, and that's my job.
Well, being with you is like working with a doormat.
Well, feel free to go and work with somebody else.
You don't mind who tramples all over you.
Why don't you go work with the other Mike?
Sometimes I have to stand up to that.
Why don't you go work with that guy Mike Osmond, who ended up being questioned by the cops?
Now, talking about great careers, right, I think we should talk about the man that we talked about last night, the Duke of Edinburgh. At 95, he's decided to take it, 96 actually, on his 96th birthday, he's going to take a backward step.
Yes.
Now, I thought that today it was outstanding, his quip. They caught him. They got a microphone in behind him when he was at the one of the last receptions he'll do.
Yeah, it was at Lord's yesterday, wasn't it?
It was it was at Lord's yesterday. It was different. Right. Today he was somewhere else, and they got a microphone behind him. And a chap who was elderly as well said, "Oh, he said, I hear you've decided to stand down." He said, "Yes, that's quite right." He said, "That's because I'm having trouble standing up these days." Ha 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 ha! I thought he was fantastic. What a witty guy he is.
Absolutely, but he he's also said that basically at the age that he now is, he has trouble with his short-term memory. He can't remember people's names, and has problems writing speeches. And he's done also, by the way, he's done more apparently public events this year so far than Prince William and Kate have done.
Yeah.
Which is remarkable, really.
He has been a magnificent servant to this country. Now, anybody who wants to say that I'm a grovel to the royals can say what they like, but he has walked 3 paces behind the Queen for the last 70 years, nearly, 65 years. And that is a job which is very, very difficult for a man to do. Because particularly 50 years ago, the male ego, would have really balked at taking second place to any woman, whereas now we have a more equinaminalist society. You know what I mean?
Equinaminalist?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Where men and women work on a sort of joint par and all that kind of stuff.
Much to your chagrin.
No, not to my chagrin at all. Talented women must forge ahead in life to improve
but you wouldn't have been able to do what he did.
The state of this country.
You would not have been able to walk 3 paces behind any woman for 70 years. You just wouldn't have been able to do it.
I would not, because I did not marry into royal patronage, if you see what I mean.
No, but I mean,
and in fact, I would never marry into royal patronage. Funny enough.
Well, you explained yesterday that you would never marry into anything.
I didn't say that.
No, you did. You explained in a very well-rounded way. A lot of people appreciated your honesty.
Yes.
Why you chosen to remain unmarried.
I did, but I didn't say I would never get married. I said that actually I'd never fallen in love with somebody enough to think, I think I'll marry this person and spend the rest of my life with them. Well, there is some chance,
really?
but perhaps the chance is depreciating as one goes on.
You'll have to stop being so unpleasant if you want to find somebody to love you.
But I'm not an unpleasant person. It's only you who brings out the combative edge in me because, of course, you spend a lot of your life trying to put me down, and, of course, that irritates me.
Not at all.
Now, what I was going to say is that, do you remember I told you many years ago I met the daughter of a very wealthy man who owned Formica.
In fact, you showed me his house when we drove up.
That's right. Funny enough, we did.
To Stansted the other weekend.
Yeah, when we drove to Stansted, what were we doing in Stansted again?
We were getting on a plane in Stansted.
Whose plane was that?
It was a Rockstar's plane.
That's right, it was, wasn't it? Yeah, we went up to Glasgow.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. But we don't want to boast about it.
No, we don't want to keep mentioning
keep it quiet. Keep it quiet.
Don't mention it.
But anyway, you're absolutely right. You went up the A41. The house is on the left at the corner of Bishop's Avenue, Bishop's Avenue, which at one time was London's poshest street. And it was in the days...
I think it probably still is.
Probably still is, yeah, in the days when I was going out with this young lady.
Yeah.
And the deal was that if I wanted to pursue a relationship with her any further, then I had to marry into the family.
Yes.
And work for her father's company.
And you would have had to have a job in his firm, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, it had happened to one of her relatives, not one of her sisters, but one of her cousins.
Right.
Because her father worked with his brothers, so there's 3 of them.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, And
you would have had to fit in somewhere into that rather complicated sort of mix, right?
I would indeed.
And you might have had to come in at the bottom as well, maybe.
Yeah, I think so, and learn the trade on the way up. But funny enough, that happened to me when I was back in Chester, right, all those years ago. I went out with Trudy for 5 years. Everybody knows that. Now, a mate of mine, right, called Phil, who's a really nice guy, and he was a good-looking lad, so we never had any problem when we went out at night. You know what I mean?
What do you mean by that?
Well, we attracted a lot of female company.
Did you not always end up with the female company that he had rejected, if you don't mind me putting it in that way?
No, to be honest, it always worked the other way around.
Really?
Yeah, maybe opposites attract, but I always used to get the best-looking girl of the two that we would tap up.
Why?
And he would get the other. I don't know. It just worked that way. Yeah. But anyway, the point of my story is this, that old Phil... Actually, I'm not sure if his name was Phil or whether his brother's name was Phil, because it was a long time ago. But this guy was...
Good friend of yours, though.
Yeah, he was a very good friend. Yeah, I think it was Phil. And so what happened was he went out with a number of young ladies, you know, maybe for 6 months here, 8 months, something like that. Yeah. But then he met this girl who was very posh. And at the time, he was a graphic designer. He was training as a graphic designer,
which is quite a posh job in those days.
Well, he was trying to make a career for himself. He wanted to design furniture and all this kind of stuff, you know. So he worked as an apprentice graphic designer when he was about 19 or 20. Anyway, he meets this very posh girl. And she stood out from the crowd because she spoke well and she dressed beautifully and all that kind of stuff. We couldn't quite make out why she was attracted to Phil, apart from the fact he was a very nice guy.
Yes.
Anyway,
well, that's a good enough reason, isn't it?
I suppose so. Within 6 months, he announced A, he was giving up graphic designing.
Yes.
B, he was getting married. And C, his new job would be manager of a supermarket because the girl he was marrying, her father owned a chain of 15 supermarkets.
Wow.
And
well, that's not particularly posh, is it? I mean, she was wealthy then. But it's not particularly posh to have a parent that owns a bunch of supermarkets, is it?
Well, I don't know. Have you never seen To the Manor Born?
Yes, that's a fictional television show.
It's a fictional television show, but Audrey Forbes Hamilton, married the guy who was the supermarket king, who was an immigrant from Lithuania, because his mother still spoke Lithuanian.
Right.
And he was incredibly posh, you know, driving around Rolls Royces.
Was he the guy with the moustache?
Yes, Peter, what's his name?
Peter Bowles.
Peter Bowles, that's right.
That was the point of the show, was that he was fake posh.
No.
That's the point. I mean, do you remember what I was telling you about David
Cameron?
Cameron?
Well, it's still posh. Fake posh is still posh.
No, it's not.
Of course
because
it is.
Proper posh, actually, is like the sort of landed gentry types. And they would regard people that own things like supermarkets as rather sort of, below the dust.
Well, they're scumbags because, you know, I believe in meritocracy.
Do you?
And if one man pulls himself up by his bootlaces to equal the wealth of somebody who's
why would you refer
landed
to them as
gentry
posh,
wealth, then they are posh.
No, but because I was telling you this story in the context of David Cameron and how David Cameron is regarded by many people as posh, but in fact, the posh set don't regard him as posh because his dad was somebody who had to actually earn a living.
Yeah, see, he's bought a shed, by the way, David Cameron.
A very expensive shed.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a shed on wheels. I just don't get it.
Well, I mean, it's apparently a very, very sort of trendy thing that he's got himself involved with here because he heard somebody talking about it and he's had it custom made. And so not only is it a shed, but it's got it's got electricity inside it. I think it's got air conditioning.
It's got a heated floor.
It's got a heated floor, yes. So, I mean, it is like a room. It's like an extension of a place.
Well, he says he's going to go in there and write his memoirs.
Right.
Now, I read a columnist...
That won't take long.
No, well, no. well, any memoirs worth remembering won't take long.
Yeah.
Most of his reign as Prime Minister was an utter disgrace, which made this country much worse when he left it than it was when he took it over. And it will be a shameful...
Well, there's very few people who've got much good to say about any Prime Minister at this
It will be a
point in
shameful
time.
account of wasted 6 years. But what I was going to say is, I read an account today from an esteemed columnist in one of our national newspapers who has her own workroom at home. And she tried the old shed bit. She said, to get out of the house and all that. And she said, it simply doesn't work.
Yeah.
You've got to get from the house to the shed.
Yes.
And on a cold winter's night, that's not an inviting proposition.
Unless you've got a shed that's got a heated floor, which I suppose is the point.
Yeah, exactly. But also, it just doesn't work. You're not connected to the house, the cup of tea situation, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, but
I'm sure I'll have all those facilities.
Well, you could have. I mean, it's interesting because I've been looking at the possibility of buying a shed for the two boys down in Sussex, because they love the idea. And there's a lot of places around Sussex where they will offer these different types of sheds.
And that would be their, adventure shed. They'd sleep in it and all that kind of stuff.
They could do all of those things.
To make sure no mad nutter broke in the middle of the night, wouldn't you?
Well, like you.
Well, no, you'd have to have tight security.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is...
where you live, you could easily find guys roaming around in the middle of the night with shotguns and things,
this is a typical kind of thing that people who live in South London would say.
Really?
That you think you live in the countryside, right? The countryside is not full of crazy people. When I first moved to Wiltshire, I had exactly that view. I used to get home and
it is full of crazies.
2 o'clock in the morning.
I mean,
and I'd think,
we know quite a few of them.
Well, that's true. And you'd find some of them in quite a few of the pubs around Pusey. But no, I mean, I used to go outside and have a cigarette and sort of stare up at the stars in the sky and listen to the screaming of the rabbits who had been attacked by various foxes around the place. And I used to think to myself, there'll probably be a couple of madmen around any minute now, walking and knocking on the window, because you believe that.
That's right.
You think in the country it is full of crazy people.
You remember?
But in fact, it wasn't.
Do you remember what was that film that made
Straw Dogs?
No, Straw
Dogs. Dustin Hoffman and Susan George
down in Cornwall.
Yep.
Where the mad people in the village didn't like the American.
That was the one.
So they attacked his wife.
Susan George.
Yeah.
She was a very fine-looking woman.
That was a very graphic scene of sexual assault.
It was a very violent film, actually. It was Sam Peckinpah, wasn't it?
Sam Peckinpah, you're right, yeah.
Yeah, look, blood spurting everywhere. Anyway, so I'm actually looking at the possibility of getting a shed.
Okay. How much does a shed cost?
Well, they're around about, I mean, you can pay as much as you like, really. But, I mean, the ones I'm looking at are sort of about 700,000-800,000 quid, something like that. And they come with...
700-800 to 1,000.
So, well, it depends on the size.
Yes, I see. Yes,
I mean, you could get one which is a straightforward.
But
shed.
how will you protect your boys? Will you lock them into the shed?
No.
Like they did in that programme on TV, and the shed burnt down. And they couldn't get them out.
The girl died. What was that show? Wasn't that The Missing?
The Missing, yeah, The Missing.
Yeah. Blimey. Yeah, and then that was a great show, actually. Is there not a new one of them coming out?
Probably. But don't you think it's a bit dangerous to let your boys sleep in a shed in the middle of a field somewhere in Sussex?
They've already slept it's not in the middle of the field, it's in our garden.
Yeah, well, but people climb over hedges and that sort of stuff, so I'd be very careful.
People do all sorts of things in life.
Yeah.
I've had them, they sleep in a tent in the garden sometimes.
Yeah. Maybe you should get a licence for a shotgun and give them a shotgun.
If I got a licence for a shotgun, you'd be better watch out, because I'd be bringing it in here and shoot you with it.
I don't know why you say things like that.
Because that would be because it'd be very tempting. I'm going to read you some tweets in a minute.
Yeah.
This is Talk Sport.
Okay.
This is Talk Sport. We are the Two Mikes. Got loads of tweets coming in, of course, at the Two Mikes, at Mike Perrier or at IROMG. You can find us on the Facebook page as well. Becky says this from New Zealand. In what alternate reality world does Porky live in when he believes men and women are equally paid? Shocking belief.
Well, they are in a lot of professions these days.
Well, there's still a big wage gap, I think, between men and women.
There will be in some professions, but for instance, the Sunday Times Rich List is coming out this weekend, okay?
It is.
We're going to talk to our friend, aren't we, from the Sunday Times
Mills,
about it on Saturday.
Tomorrow,
yeah. And that will show that Adele is £40 million richer than she was this time last year.
That's right.
So, it's not all bad news for women earners.
Well, no, but I don't really think you can hold Adele up as an average women earner.
Well, no, but I definitely agree with that. But nevertheless, in other professions, I mean, for instance, the cover of the Sunday Times magazine last week was Joanna Coles, the lady who runs, which one does she run in America?
Hey?
It's not Vogue, is it? It's something else.
Well, I don't know. Red Book?
No. She runs a magazine group, but she's the lady who works at a stand-up desk with a treadmill underneath. Yeah, Condé Nast, that's right. She walks on it in high heels all day long.
She's another superwoman.
She gets millions of dollars.
She's another superwoman, millionaire in a super job.
Yeah, okay. Well, so where is this? Where's this wage disparity you're talking about?
The wage disparity is everywhere. You have to. You look,
everywhere.
You talk to any woman or any man who knows about the way that pay scales work in this country and in many countries around the world.
Yes.
And women, on average, are still paid less money than men for doing the same job.
Well, I can tell you here at TalkSport, we do not discriminate between men and women workers.
Really?
We definitely do not. And, you know, when I had an influence on this year, I made absolutely sure at TalkSport everybody is equal.
Yeah.
Okay?
There's only one woman presenter here, isn't there?
What's that got to do with it?
Well, so how do you make that work, exactly?
Well, you make it work.
So is she on the same par as somebody who is on a smaller amount of money or a bigger amount of money?
She has the...
All the presenters are paid different amounts of money.
She has the equal standing and respect that all presenters here have.
Is that right?
No doubt
but what about the money,
it.
though?
Well, I can't tell you about that.
So you don't know, do you?
All I'm saying is there is no discrimination in this organisation between men and women. I can promise you that.
I'm sure TalkSport are very happy for you to speak out for them on their behalf.
Yes, exactly.
About the Equal Pay Act. But we should give you
no
some more
problem at all. Now listen, we should
Freddie,
talk...
hang on, I haven't finished reading you some tweets yet.
Oh, right, okay.
Here's one from the Verminator. He says, poor MG just mentions the truth about Koeman and Porky goes into a mad rage attacking him for no reason.
No,
he says, take the blue glasses off. Freddie says, give that oversized plank the whack he deserves. I don't know how you've restrained yourself all this time.
Yeah, violence is never the answer.
Sometimes
even
it is,
the threat of violence. The threat of violence certainly isn't.
Sometimes it is. And Matt says, I used to have a shed in my garden as a kid that we used as a camp. We used to sleep out in it in the summer. Great times.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great adventure when you're a youngster to
Did you
get
ever
out
have
under the stars.
something like that in your back garden when you were growing up? Or were you feared of the sort of the Chester maniac coming in and killing you?
No, I just hated camping. I hate the smell of canvas. I hate being that close to the ground, to the...
Right.
Because in the ground you've got like worms, and I hated being close to anything that contains worms and all that kind of stuff, and I didn't like it at all. I never had this adventurous streak in me. Let's take off for the weekend and go and climb the hills in Wales and throw, pitch a tent and all that. No thanks. Filthy, dirty fields and all that kind of stuff. I wasn't interested. Never interested at all.
To sleep out under the stars is quite amusing to do. I'm not saying you want to do it for a sort of a pastime, but you can do it occasionally. It's quite nice.
The only time I slept out under the stars, you mentioned Wiltshire, was when I used to go and see my mate in Wiltshire, get bladderated to the point of collapse and wake up in a field somewhere on a hill in Wiltshire because he said we should lie down and stare at the stars because there was no...
And then you would fall asleep.
Yeah, that's right, because there was no, what did you call it? What's the thing you have in cities that makes you stop seeing the stars?
Well,
some sort of
pollution.
Fog. Light pollution, that's right. No light pollution. He said, then you see the stars. The only problem is I'd only stare at them for about 3 minutes before I fell fast asleep because I was so bladderated, and then would wake up to the thunder of hooves coming towards me because we were on the gallops of some local...
That's not good.
Some local trainer's yard,
Right. That's not a very good idea, no.
But anyway, look...
Well, there are different ways of doing it. You don't have to get bladderated and pass out in the way of a load of horses,
Okay, true. Now, the Duke of Edinburgh, of course, one of the things he's most famous for is the Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme.
That's true.
And a lot of that involves, trekking around places around the world and setting up tents and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, going on ships and everything else.
I think he's quite an honourable man in the sense that, he did at one time have a reputation as a bit of a ladies' man, but it has never been validated or justified.
Well,
don't you?
Well, there have been certainly people that have written about certain liaisons that he was thought to have been involved with. In fact, there were some who thought that he was mixed up in some of the earlier Profumo-type scandals, weren't there?
There's no evidence of that, so I'm not getting into that. I mean, at one time, he sort of commandeered, allegedly, the Royal Yacht Britannia as his own.
Yeah.
And he used to invite a few mates on board because, he played a lot of polo and all that.
Well, what do you want to play polo on a boat for?
No, he played polo at Windsor Great Park. And then afterwards say, I tell you what, chaps, this weekend, stay in old Britannia and have a sail around the Isle of Wight because I'm the Commodore.
Yeah.
He is the Commodore of the Isle of Wight Yachting Club.
So it's straight into the roller after the game of polo at Windsor and then straight down the coast.
It's straight down to Britannia, which is usually berthed at somewhere like Dartmouth or...
Well, I thought you said it was around by the Isle of Wight.
No, they would go and sail round the Isle of Wight.
Yeah, but not from Dartmouth. That's a long trip, isn't it?
No, not really. Dartmouth's not that far away.
Really?
I mean, it might sometimes be at Portsmouth.
Well, it's
might
overnight,
be at Plymouth.
isn't
It might be at Dartmouth, yeah. Actually, I think it was birthed more at that place in Kent, which used to be a very famous naval port, which has now fallen into disrepair.
Oh, yeah?
The naval yard, Chatham. Chatham.
Okay.
Yeah, he used to birth it at Chatham.
Yeah.
But he travelled 72,430 miles on the Royal Yacht Britannia, including 2 round-the-world voyages.
Yeah. Well, according to one of the papers here, he says 22,191 solo engagements, 5,493 speeches, 637 foreign visits. And then they also say countless gaffes that made us giggle.
Yes.
And a couple of the papers have done all that.
Yeah, no, I've seen all the gaffes. Yeah, they're quite funny. But he's got a load of honorary titles.
This one? The Philippines must be half empty. You're all here running the NHS.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, very few people could get away with saying the things he said.
Well, I mean, he said things, didn't he, that I don't want to repeat about people in China and all that kind of stuff. But
you're too fat to be an astronaut.
I thought it was great. He told a 13-year-old kid from Salford who said he wanted to be an astronaut, and he said, "You're too fat to be an astronaut."
What about this one where he's apparently getting frustrated by a slow photographer at the lunch for Battle of Britain pilots in 2015? Just take the effing picture.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. There's a picture of him with Gwyneth Paltrow.
I like that.
She looks incredibly glamorous.
Yeah.
And he looks so relaxed in her company. He's just leaning back on a rail and chatting to her like it's the most normal thing in the world to be speaking to one of the world's most famous actresses.
Yes. Well, I mean, the thing about him is that he is very much. He was known as sort of Phil the Greek, but he was a very charming man.
He wasn't known as Phil the Greek
when he was young, because he came from this Greek family who had been sort of exiled from Greece, didn't they?
I mean, there's some very unkind accounts of his early days, because I remember when I was at the Press Association, we had to keep updating people's obituaries, and of course he's a man of a great age, so you'd be incompetent in our business not to do that.
Yes.
And I got somebody to get one out, and honestly, somebody had written it years ago that they call him Phil the Greek, who basically married the Queen because he was poverty-stricken.
Well,
he was a poverty-stricken exiled royal floating around Europe trying to find something to do and somebody to give him a few bob.
There is some truth to that.
Which is, rather hard.
Because I think his family had been sort of disinherited by the royal family of Greece or whatever they were.
I think it was the Greek junta, wasn't it? It just sort of closed all the accounts down and all that. Yeah.
I think so. But I mean, there still is a Greek royal family, so it's not entirely all gone to waste.
No, exactly,
but he was a very charming man. And, he was, as you say, the guy that had to walk 3 steps behind her.
Yes.
At a time when I suppose you wouldn't have expected women to be quite as prominent in the world as she was.
No, exactly, yeah, I totally agree.
So, remarkable coverage in the papers anyway.
Well, the thing is, and we often make this mistake in Fleet Street, if you didn't know and couldn't read English, you'd say, "Oh, this guy must be dead," because there's so much coverage on him. His picture's on the front of every paper. And
I want to remind you of the conversation you and I had on this show yesterday, just before we stopped broadcasting at around about 10 to 4 in the morning.
Yes.
Because there was word that something was going on.
There was.
At the
There
palace.
was a movement of all the senior palace officials
and there was
descending
lots
on
of,
Buckingham Palace.
I mean, one of the more, shall we say, big newspaper groups sent out in error a note that said that he'd actually died.
Oh, did they? I didn't know that.
Because I think it went out by mistake, but it only went out for a few seconds, literally.
Right,
because it was picked up, and people thought, "Oh my goodness me, there's a big story coming out."
Yes.
But it turned out not to be the case, and as time got sort of closer to the morning when an announcement was going to be made, people said, "No, this is obviously not anything terribly serious, but it's just something about the Duke of Edinburgh."
I, in fact, predicted, didn't I, that there was going to be an announcement that Harry was getting married.
You thought it was about the wedding,
Yeah, I did, but that's yet to come. That is yet to come. Yeah. Hey, by the way, just moving on from the Duke for a minute, did you see the interview with the lad who was rescued off his surfboard?
Yes.
I mean, he was incredibly emotional.
Well, I mean, he should have died, really, shouldn't he?
And he realises that, and his father pointed out that for the first 20 minutes when he was rescued, he was elated.
Yeah.
And it was, get me a bottle of champagne and all this. And then, since then, the sudden reality of how close he was to death has descended upon him, and now he can't face up to talking about it without crying.
What I like about him is that he's actually come out and said, "I'm never going surfing again." Because normally when you get these guys, they go, "Can't wait to get back on the board."
Yeah, that's right. Get me back in the surf.
He's like, "I'm not doing it ever again."
Yeah, never doing it again.
Because he went out on a Sunday morning thinking that he was going to have a nice time.
That's right.
Ended up halfway to Northern Ireland.
That's right. And by the way, it was just off the Mull of Kintyre.
Yeah.
I was asking you geographic. The Mull of Kintyre, of course, very famous because Paul McCartney wrote a
for God's sake.
#1 song. Well, he did,
I know, but you don't have to say that,
With
do you?
the sun and the times of the Mull of Kintyre.
See, the brevity is all, right? If you just mentioned Mull of Kintyre, people would know what you meant. You wouldn't have to then mention it again and mention his name.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to be specific about the sort of things that I'm talking about, okay?
Really? Okay.
No problem at all.
Woodenhead says this, Porky wasn't scared of the Chester Maniac because he was the Chester Maniac. The locals were glad he was locked inside a tent.
Locked inside a tent.
Norman says, could I have a birthday shout-out? I'm 41 on Sunday, the 7th of May.
Right.
Well, that's not today, is it?
No.
So should we say no?
No, we'll say yes because he sent the note in and we'll forget about it. So it's 41 next Sunday.
Sunday. Well,
what's the guy's name?
It's Norman.
Norman. Yeah. Very happy birthday on Sunday, my friend.
Norman.
Yeah. Stormin, Norman, you're 31 on Sunday.
William.
Have a great day.
William says this, if you get a shed, MG, you could lease it out to the Chinese. Being non-magnetic, they could do the pigeon brain transplants in it.
Why not?
Not a bad idea.
Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dave says, I know a man who can sell you a decent-sized elephant gun if you really want to take out the Porkmeister.
Come on, this is getting a bit harsh. I mean, we don't mean any of this, obviously.
Of course not. I'm not actually going to shoot Porky.
No,
that's far too good for him. Milko says, it's impressive film knowledge, MG. Straw Dogs was Sam Peckinpah, 1971, and Susan George was indeed stunning.
She was, and assaulted.
Well, never mind that. You've already mentioned
Rogerising sort of way.
Yeah. Well, you've already mentioned that. I don't think we should go any further into that situation.
I think you're right.
Anyway, there's lots more news coming up over the course of the night because there's an election going on, Not the one that's coming up next month, but there was one last night as well. So we might tell you a bit about that. This is Talk Sport. We are the two mics. Lots going on. Of course, Porky Quiz Night coming up a little bit later on. It is on the Duke of Wellington.
Yes.
Because this week was one of sort of anniversary of his birth.
It certainly was.
Now, have you seen this story on the back page of the Times? Some of the other papers have got it as well.
Right.
In addition to, most of them are going on with Here V Go, which is sort of a bit easy, really, isn't it, on Sort of V Go. But as a result of all that business with Jerry Barton,
indeed,
right, the Sun are saying, and it's a story by Martin Ziegler, that the FA is considering... Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
What did I say?
The Sun.
Oh, did I say the Sun?
Doesn't matter, yeah, go on.
Yeah, still the same owners. Yeah.
Yes.
Football Association is considering ending its partnership with betting firms.
Yeah.
Isn't that strange?
Well, the alarm has been raised by the Joey Barton situation.
Yeah.
But the other thing that raised the alarm was a distinctly uneasy feeling about Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah.
Doing the BetVictor advert, okay? And sorry, I'm not mentioning brand names to enhance them. I'm saying that was what it was about. They're associated with Liverpool.
Yeah.
And in particular, one line. And one line in it said that, in fact, the 31st minute is the average time of the first goal and all this kind of stuff, you know.
Right.
And people looked at that and thought, wow, that is, really taking the relationship between football and betting companies a step further. Right. Now,
because it would be one thing to be, say, the sort of the face of the advertising.
Yes.
But to actually then get into the specifics of the advertising
is
the problem, right?
Quite right. I mean, I was quite shocked when I saw Jose Mourinho in his first incantation at Chelsea. A few weeks after he took the job, I saw him in a watch advert, very prominently displaying, much more so than any manager had ever done.
Yeah.
Now, the Klopp thing took it on another step. However, I can't see any problem whatsoever about betting companies being involved in the sponsorship of sport or in sport because they actually bring so much funding to one particular sport, which is horse racing. Yeah. Why shouldn't they to other sports?
Well, indeed. I mean, but again, this will be the sort of insidious reach of political correctness, won't it? Because what we've got here is Greg Clark, the FA chairman, saying that he's now looking into whether it's appropriate for the sport to have official relationship with gambling companies and alcohol companies. Yeah. And a decision is expected to be made by the FA board later on this summer. Yeah. But, I mean, he's also sort of...
Why alcohol companies?
Well, he's kind of equating it with the way that Formula One had to remove cigarette sponsorship from their sport. And it's almost as though he's sort of preparing the ground for it already, despite the fact that the FA have also got all sorts of links with other companies which sell, fast food, which sell, any number of other things which you might say could be dangerous for people if they don't use them properly.
Yeah. I mean, the FA has commercial agreements with the alcohol drinks companies Carling, Budweiser and Carlsberg. Yeah. Long-term deal with Ladbrokes, a betting company, right? Was only agreed in June last year, and insiders say it's worth more than double the £2 million a year deal that the FA previously had with William Hill. Well, Mr. Clark's got to, step forward here and say, look, the fact that we have a relationship with a betting company is because betting companies are so heavily involved in our sport. Why would you bar access from them to get involved? Well, I think it's a wrong attitude to have to the current issues which have come under the microscope involving betting companies. But that's down to the individual.
Well, exactly.
It's not down to the fact that betting companies exist.
But also, does it not also give way too much importance to Jerry Barton, who's now going to go around claiming, I've managed to change the face of football because of the fact that I said that it was a bit ironic that I was being sort of hauled over the coals, given that betting is all over football.
Sure. I think
distasteful.
I think there'll always be a natural relationship between football and betting companies and alcohol brands because football fans enjoy a bet and enjoy a drink.
Yes.
So why would you want to discriminate against them? Just because they're in businesses which generate huge amounts of money.
And also, I don't see many businesses lining up to sponsor English football, particularly the FA.
Absolutely.
If you're talking about the national team.
Yeah.
Because they're a waste of time. Why would you want to be associated with them?
I don't know.
I mean, I find it very strange.
But you put your finger on it when you said it's a politically correct reaction.
Yeah.
People are starting to say, should there be this much involvement between betting companies have done an immense amount of good for football. Take Stoke City, for instance. The Coates family, who have the controlling interest in Stoke City, also own Bet365.
Right.
Now, they have generated maybe up to £1 billion, much of which has gone back into the game. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So to try and start discriminating against companies like, for instance, the tyre companies, what's the one that does Champions League, eh? Goodyear and all that kind of stuff.
For the sake of argument.
Yeah,
well what about Gazprom? I mean, they don't mind UEFA taking money from Gazprom, which is effectively the massive, company that was given billions and billions of euro petrodollars by Putin.
Yeah, that's right, but they say now that they are noble, but betting companies aren't.
Yeah.
That surprises me greatly.
Now, Mark Bosnich is a man that knows a little bit about goalkeeping.
He knows everything about everything,
he does. And we've been trying to get a hold of him, and we have finally managed to get him. Mark Bosnich is here. Very good morning to you, Mark. Welcome.
Good morning or good evening to you guys. How are you?
Yeah, hi, Bozzy. Very well, thank you.
Very well indeed. Thanks very much for joining us. Now, we wanted to ask you a little bit about the game last night. Great free kick by Marcus Rashford. Good result for Jose Mourinho. Is he going to do the business and get them back in the Champions League? And if he does, who does he need to get hold of to make it a success next season?
Well, to answer your first question, I think he will. It was a superb win last night. It would have been by more, but for Celta Vigo's goalkeeper, who I thought was outstanding. They've still got to obviously be very careful in the home leg, but they should go through, and it won't be easy. It looks as though they will play Ajax in the final. In terms of next season, then obviously they'll probably have to go through the qualifying phase, which they should be okay. In terms of strengthening, well, look, the boy Rashford probably wouldn't have got his chance. Let's be, brutally honest, if Ibrahimovic had stayed fit. And as Paul Scholes said, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, he has got the ability to be a true star. So they might go and get somebody to strengthen up front in terms of squad-wise, but I wouldn't be getting somebody I would say that would be a main man. I'd let Rashford have his opportunity. The fullback position is another one. We don't know, obviously, how long Luke Shaw is going to be out for, but obviously there has been a few problems there with him as well. And probably in the central defence as well, that they'll need to go and strengthen. So I would say at least 3 players that they look to go and strengthen for them to take that further step forward. I mean, look, people have become accustomed to Manchester United being doing so well under Sir Alex and for so long. Obviously, it's been a little bit of foreign territory the last 3 or 4 seasons, but I don't actually think they need too much to put them into that top bracket.
Okay, Bozzy, have you been surprised by the speed at which Manchester United deteriorated after Sir Alex Ferguson left, and how long it's taken Jose Mourinho to get them back up there?
Not necessarily. I think, look, when you have somebody for so long, I think that's why Arsenal have been a little bit reluctant to part ways with Arsene Wenger. The club gets in a certain mode and in a certain, in a certain way, and then normally there is a little bit of a dip, and that's why it's so difficult for the gentleman who comes straight after that club legend. I mean, Arsenal supporters that listen to this are saying, well, it couldn't get much worse for us. Well, it could. We've seen how things can change around very, very quickly. We saw Liverpool after their dominance in the 70s and 80s and so forth, and then after they won that last title, they haven't won one since. So I think it was inevitable that they were going to dip, and it was going to take a little bit of time for them to continue. But I was a wee bit surprised, obviously, that first season, and that's why I feel very sorry for David Moyes. A lot of people sort of said, "Oh, David Moyes, this, that, and the other." But I do feel a little bit sorry for him because I think that was inevitable that was going to happen, but perhaps not in that such dramatic fashion that first season.
Yeah, sure.
David Moyes, of course, is deciding what he's going to do next season. You can't really see him going down the Championship. Will he get another job in the Premier League, do you think, Mark?
Well, that's a very, very good question. Look, I don't think obviously that incident with that lady reporter's helped him at all. But when it rains, it pours, as they say, good or bad. Going to Sunderland, I mean, let's be brutally honest, that they were pretty much favourites to get relegated at the start of the season anyway. I don't think it would have been, would have mattered who pretty much went there. They really, they didn't have the players, in my opinion, that sort of you could say that they would definitely, had an opportunity of staying up. They were going to go down anyway. But for he to get another job, but it's going to be difficult for him because of, like I said to you, what's happened in the last couple of seasons. So. Look, Rafa Benitez, for me, is a great example. I mean, I'm not comparing him at all to David Moyes, but a great example of, a great manager who's not, not afraid to go down and bring the team back up. I don't think that's a problem whatsoever.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The trouble is we haven't got any great English managers or even British managers in this country. We have to rely on overseas coaches. They now dominate the top of the Premier League, Bozzy, and that's got to be a worry for this country for the future.
Well, very much so. But look, I think, and I had this conversation with somebody the other day. When foreign owners do come in, inevitably they're going to bring in their own people.
Yeah.
And that does point towards, like I said, to them coming in and then bringing in managers that they're a little bit more accustomed to. In terms of the British managers, yes, you're 100% right. But I mean, a lot of managers in the past would have got opportunities, which they are not getting this time around. When they were young managers coming up, because there wasn't really that much choice. And, a lot of the foreign managers that have come in, have been very, very successful. So a lot of people turn around and say, oh, well, this one and that one. And ours is a global game. I can understand that, to give the British managers an opportunity brigade. I can understand that totally because, you should always look first to your local managers, no matter what country that you're in, and then look further afield.
Sure.
But with it being such a, like I said, a high-profile league, and also probably the best, one of the best well-paid leagues in the world.
Yeah.
These owners have got the choice of everywhere around the world. So I think there should be, like I said to you, from the grassroots in terms of coaching and so forth. There should be a major push now. There's a lot of good ex-players out there who deserve an opportunity in management to look for those British managers before you go abroad. But it's very difficult telling somebody that's come in from abroad who have put a whole lot of money into a club.
Sure.
You're basically telling them then who to appoint manager. They're entitled to appoint a manager whoever they see fit.
Totally agree.
Mark, listen, thank you very much indeed.
Bozzy, thank you ever so much.
Leave it there. Enjoy the rest of the day. China actually may have some part to play in the next couple of seasons. I've got some stories to tell you about what's going on with Diego Costa.
Really? Have you?
Right now, though, we're out of time.
Fascinating.
Talk Sport. This is Talk Sport. We are the Two Mics. There will be a podcast coming out a little bit later on. We'll be back, of course, on the warm-up tomorrow from 11 o'clock. And Scott says this. Porky, Peter Bowles' character in To the Manor Born was Richard De Vere.
Yes.
He was half Czech, half Polish, and not Lithuanian.
Oh, really? I thought it was Lithuanian.
Well, I mean,
if you're half Czech and you're half Polish, you are of Eastern European stock.
Yes.
And that's where Lithuania is.
Okay.
So don't worry about it.
Trevor says this. Vigo, some desert. Vigo is one of the wettest cities in Europe with 75 inches of rain a year.
Vigo.
Compare London with 28 inches a year. I think so, where the game with Manchester United was held last night.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Saw some nice pictures, actually, that were put out by one of the football reporters who was over there. Some nice kind of pictures of the port.
Yes.
I don't know if you've ever been there, but it looked like quite a pleasant little place. Quite pleasant little spots.
Yes.
Vigo,
look, there's plenty of pleasant little spots in the world, and every time you see a picture of one, you always say, I must go there. For instance, this week, the Times, the Thunderer, have been doing a series of pullouts on Britain's pubs.
Oh, yeah.
So they had the Britain's 20 best seaside pubs.
Have you been to any of them?
Well, I was about to say to you, Britain's 20 best pubs for dining in.
Oh, yeah.
Britain's 20 best real ale pubs. Britain's 20 best country pubs.
Right.
And Britain's 20 best sort of city pubs and all that. Out of the whole of them, I think there's about 100 of them. I'd been to about 4.
Really?
Yeah. So
is that all?
Yeah.
That surprises me.
Yeah, exactly. And so what I'm saying is that when you see all these things, I mean, if you've never sort of read something about some travel thing in a publication and thought, oh, one of these days I'm going there, and you cut it out, and you put it in a drawer, and of course you never get there, and you lose the cutting, and it never happens.
No, exactly.
So there are so many wonderful places in the world to go that I've stopped doing it now because I thought, well, look, I'll just end up somewhere one day and it'll be great. You know what I mean?
No, you can't really make too many plans in that direction.
No, you can't.
I was given a book at Christmas, actually, by my daughter of places to dine out in London.
Oh, right.
And I've only actually tried twice to get into any of them. And I, wasn't able to on either occasion because, of course, everybody's now thinking these are very trendy restaurants.
Exactly.
And you can't get unless you want to book about 3 months in advance.
Yeah.
You can't get in.
Yeah, I know.
And I don't want to make a reservation for dinner 3 months in advance.
I totally agree.
Because I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 3 months.
I totally agree. And also, I think the whole purpose of going is ruined a little bit by the austerity shown to you when you get there by the staff who make it very clear that you're very, very lucky to be here. Exactly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can't be bothered with that.
No, I can't either.
And also, it might be good now, but in 3 months it might be rubbish.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? When a place is in big demand and all that, they run the rule over you, not the other way around.
Yes.
Like, for instance, if you didn't like your table, their attitude would be take it or leave it.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas in most restaurants you go to, how many times have you gone to a restaurant and thought, I don't just feel comfortable, this one's too near the kitchen or something like that. And you say, could I? And that's very nice. But I've been to restaurants where, like you say, they've told you, look, there's a 3-week waiting list for this restaurant. And you're literally told you cram yourself in the corner or not.
Yeah, I'm too old for that.
Yeah,
stuff
I'm
now.
as well. Yeah.
Similarly, if they say to you things like, when you make the reservation for, say, 7:30 for dinner, you must vacate the table by 9:30.
Oh, yeah, all of that.
I'll be like, well, I'll tell you when I'll vacate the table. Thanks
I
very much.
Ignore that.
I tend to ignore it. And very rarely do they now actually move you on. But I always kind of slightly bristle when they say that.
Well, you know what they're doing there? They're hoping for a second wave of diners coming about that time.
Right.
And usually they don't, but it's an insurance policy that if they do and they're being asked to wait in the bar and they're getting irritable and, that sort of thing.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it happens to a central London restaurant we use quite a lot, doesn't it? They always say, you can have a table 7:30, but you must be away by 9:30.
That's right, yeah.
You can go back to the bar.
Right.
And how many times have we sat there until 11:30 because the second wave has never come in?
Also, I think they've worked out they're making plenty of money from us. Because I think what they don't like is people who are sitting there sort of nursing one cup of coffee for about 4 hours and talking about the kids' school arrangements.
That doesn't happen on our table.
On our tables, we tend to be getting even more ridiculously blatherated and ordering more very expensive wine.
Particularly when we had a guest one time who came in and said that the only thing he really liked was this special whiskey at £9 a shot.
Yes, I remember that.
And he had 3 trebles.
That's right.
So
minimum.
He had 3 trebles.
Yeah.
So each treble was costing 27
quid.
And when the bill came, we realised he'd been ordering it himself.
Yeah.
It was over 80 quid.
I know.
For 3 glasses of whiskey.
Shocking.
It's not right.
It's not going to happen anymore.
Do you remember, not so long ago, we highlighted a story and got a lady on who had all her bees stolen?
Yes.
Remember?
Yes, I do remember that.
Fascinating story because she said it put her out of business.
Was it a woman or was it not a man that had his bees stolen?
I think it was a woman.
No, I think it was a man.
It was a man, and it was in California,
He had them stolen in California, I think, but he might have been from somewhere else.
No, he was, but I mean, it was an American, wasn't it? It was an American problem.
Yes.
And what I'm saying is, he said we might go out of business.
He had them hijacked, didn't he?
Had them hijacked, stolen, all that. Well, listen to this. I've just come across this.
Right.
This is Houghton Pagnell Hall in South Yorkshire.
All right.
Hives containing at least 24,000 bees have been stolen from a private estate in the first case of hive rustling in Britain.
That's incredible.
Thieves took 6 prized hives from the grounds of Houghton Pagnell Hall in South Yorkshire. Amanda Clayton, 53, and her partner Chris Blundell, 46, lost at least 4 irreplaceable queens in the raid on Wednesday night last week. She thinks that the theft of the entire stock, worth about £2,000 in bee worth, but tens of thousands in terms of their business, was carried out by another beekeeper.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
That's incredible.
Beekeeper wars?
I wonder if they were listening to our show because the guy we spoke to, I believe, it was a guy called Lloyd Cunliffe, I think.
Was that it? Yeah.
And because, I think the cost of his sort of missing bees was something like $500,000.
Oh, it was something like that, yeah.
It was a massive amount of money.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
So this lady
got them back.
I have no idea. Maybe we should check up on him.
Yeah.
Now, this lady says it had to be an expert, otherwise they would have been stung to death.
Right.
She said it has to be another beekeeper, which breaks my heart to say. I think someone has had their eye on them. There were pounds of honey ready to harvest, and we were about to harvest them. Whoever stole them won't have to do much work to get that out. It was a clean job. They left no clues as to who they were. I'm angry that someone has come along and taken something we've taken so long to build. I'm upset and worried that somebody's been on this estate, which is private, and stolen all the bees.
Yeah.
Now, it's been reported to the South Yorkshire Police, Mrs. Clayton was told by the estate that there were 2 redundant hives on the site. She took them over, later adding another 4. So she started the business, and the business is now ruined.
Right.
I mean, that is shocking.
Absolutely horrendous, yeah. I mean, according to the story I'm looking at, this was back in January, you're quite right, that we spoke to this guy in California who said that he'd lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in hives and equipment as well.
Yes.
And that he'd have to basically start all over again.
Yeah, that's right.
He was going to use the bees for pollinating the almond crops.
Yes.
And it doesn't look as if his bees were ever recovered.
No, it does.
Awful.
It's terrible, and in fact, it says that the value of bees has soared in recent years.
Yeah.
Used to cost between £50 and £100 for a hive of 10,000.
Yeah.
And that's now multiplied by 5.
Well, I remember you were going to get at one point. You were going to get a hive, weren't you? For your sister.
For my sister, I was. Yeah, but she'd actually heard about it when I talked about it on the radio and said, "On pain of death."
Really?
Yeah. She said.
Did she not?
She said she set fire to it. Because,
that's horrendous, that.
Why?
Does she have no sort of milk of human kindness?
Well, no. I mean, she was being quite blunt about it, that she wasn't interested in putting on...
She's more like you, this sister, isn't she, than the other the nicer sister.
Yeah, she wasn't interested in putting on, one of these sort of, what would you call them, like astronaut-type suits.
Yeah.
And going out and,
a beekeeper's outfit.
Yeah, beekeeper's outfit, that's right, yeah. Now, listen, I've got some amazing news for you.
Yeah, go on.
How many times have I told you that the way to solve the world's water problem in Africa is to cut off a big chunk of ice in Antarctica or the Arctic and tow it to the shore of the country that needs it?
Well, I think you've said that, but not only have you said that, you've also said, have you not, you could transport it by like an oil tanker type scenario.
Yes, you could, yeah.
Because obviously it would melt and you carry it like iced water.
And you have always mocked me and said it won't work.
Ridiculous idea.
Right, okay. Yeah. Listen to this, please, from one of my international journals.
Yeah, go on.
This comes from Cairo, okay?
Cairo?
Okay.
As in Egypt.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Well,
Would you know any other Cairos?
Well, no, I just thought it might be somebody's name.
No, this is from...
Because we have a Twitter follower who calls herself Caro,
the biggest...
Caroline.
Oh, this is Cairo, the biggest city in Africa.
Night boat to Cairo.
Night boat to Cairo.
My madness.
Right, in perhaps the most radical plan to combat the United Arab Emirates' acute shortage of drinking water, an environmental company has devised a plan to drag icebergs 6,000 miles across the Indian Ocean.
Who's come up with this idea?
I'll tell you. And park them off the country's coast.
Right.
Abdullah Shahi, who's director of the Abu Dhabi-based National Advisor Bureau.
Abdullah Shahi.
Abdullah Shahi, an environmental consultancy, has teamed up with a French engineer called Georges Mougan to present the unusual solution. Mr. Mougan, who's been a vocal advocate of harvesting icebergs since he was employed by the Saudi royals to look into the idea in the mid-70s.
I can see what's happening here.
Yeah, well,
so this guy's been taking a full shilling from Saudis for about 50 years, telling them what a great idea it is, but he's produced nothing so far.
Well, hang on. In those days, he formed a company called Iceberg Transport International.
And how did that go?
Which sounds a bit like Thunderbirds, doesn't it, in iceberg terms?
It sounds like the sort of equivalent, the iceberg equivalent of your television career in the internet.
Yeah, he's now tapping into freshwater reserves of the iceberg, sort of population.
Right.
The iceberg stock.
Yes.
The iceberg stock.
Yes.
And he's dragging it. The Desert Gulf State is one of the most arid countries on Earth.
Right.
It only has 78 millimetres of rain every year, according to the World Bank.
Yeah, but this guy's been working for the Saudis for 50 years. He hasn't managed to get an iceberg anywhere near the place.
No, he hasn't, no.
So he's not doing very well, is he?
So now he said, I've now perfected it.
Great.
Right. It relies on shrinking groundwater reserves and desalination so far, the United Arab Emirates. What he's doing is, we plan to tow icebergs located north of Antarctica, some 9,200 kilometres to the shores of Fujairah in the United Arab...
It's taken this guy 50 years to come up with this plan.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Great.
The initial plan is to transport one iceberg, then go back for more if the first stage of the project is successful. The targeted icebergs are now floating around some 1,200 miles north of the Antarctic.
Right.
They are 2 miles long and 300 metres deep.
Well, that's a long way away, and so far it sounds to me like this guy still hasn't got a clue how he's going to get the icebergs from one place to the other.
He's going to tow them. He's towing them from Antarctica to the United Arab Emirates.
It's not going to work. It's a complete and utter idiotic idea.
It's not. It must work. He's a scientist.
No. He's been doing the same job for 50 years.
I wonder what size...
And he hasn't managed to do anything.
If the iceberg starts off at 2 miles long and 300 metres deep when it's in the Antarctic, by the time he gets to UAE, it might be about 6 feet by 6 feet.
He'll be able to put it inside a can.
Yeah, that's all that's left.
And he'll be able to tell his masters, oh, look, I've brought you one.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about a proper drought coming up next, though. This is Talk Sport.
Good.
It's just gone noon, our fast monsoon on the banks of the River Nile. Here comes the boat, only half afloat. Usman grins a toothless smile. Only just one more to this desolate shore. Last boat along the River Nile. Doesn't seem to care, no more wind in his hair as he reaches his last half mile.
I can see this guy, this French guy,
Yep.
calling in the icebergs as they arrive into the UAE.
Yeah.
That's like back to Cairo. Great song.
No. It is, a great song. The reason they don't melt completely is because most of it's immersed underwater.
Sure.
So they're not subject to heat and all that kind of stuff, And by the time they get there, they're about the same size. Okay.
Well, they don't know that though because it's never been done. I mean, the reason for me being, being doubtful about this is that this guy's been researching this whole business since he went to work for the Saudis. This French guy, and so far he hasn't managed to bring an iceberg anywhere closer than north of the Antarctic, which is where they are.
They've done all the research, and they say that an iceberg that started off in the Antarctic, by the time it got to the UAE, would still retain 70% of its mass. Yeah. So that's still an awful lot of water. Now, over the years, icebergs have been subject to other scientists' whims. For instance, in 1825, the developed nations, which was basically in those days England and France and the flourishing United States of America, had a plan to drag icebergs to the equator because they thought the world was unbalanced.
They might well have had a plan, but the point is it doesn't work. That's why it hasn't happened.
Do you know, in the Second World War, the cabinet papers, which have been released since then, revealed that Winston Churchill told scientists to turn icebergs, that could be dragged from the Antarctic into aircraft carriers.
What?
Because they were so stable in water, they were even more stable than a ship.
Yeah.
And that if you've got a suitably big iceberg and put the engineers on it and levelled it on the top, it was a perfect landing platform for
so you wouldn't have to actually build
you wouldn't have to build aircraft.
Well, I mean,
carriers.
that to me would be a more sensible way to go forward. But to try and tow an iceberg into the middle of the Middle East is ridiculous. By the way, did you see old Donald Trump is now going over to Saudi Arabia? He announced yesterday in the Rose Garden that he's making a trip, his first foreign trip, and he's going to go to Saudi Arabia, Israel, and then he said something.
North Korea?
Not North Korea. No.
I thought he said he wanted to go to Pyongyang.
Well, he said that he would be an honour to meet old Kim Jong Un. No, but what he did say, which really spooked me, was that he said, and this will please my cardinals. Like he's got cardinals. Yeah. He's going to go to Rome. He's going to go see the Pope.
Really?
But since when does the President of the United States have cardinals?
Well, I suppose President Kennedy would have had some because they were the leading Catholic family in America.
It's not like Cardinal Richelieu, though, is it?
No.
It's not like you've got a bunch of them sitting there.
No, I suppose not.
Cardinals.
My cardinals, that's what he calls it, yeah. I see also he's managed to overturn Obamacare.
By one vote, yeah.
By one vote, that's right. Now he's got a...
Although nobody's quite sure what it means.
Nobody's quite sure what it means or what's going to replace what's there now, or even that the Senate will endorse it because, of course, the American political system has to go
It's very weird. Well, we could ask Sandro about that because maybe he's going to come back to Britain now that he doesn't have any health care.
We will. No,
but listen, there's a real drought problem going on. Never mind all this airy-fairy nonsense from your Frenchman in the Middle East, right?
Yes.
This is in Surrey and in Kent and in other parts of the southeast. Yeah. There is a massive problem because, according to a company called Affinity, I don't know whether you get your water from Affinity Water.
No, I don't know.
Because they supply 3.6 million people in Bedfordshire, Berkshire, Buckinghamshire, Essex, Hertfordshire, Surrey, Kent and London.
Yeah.
Right? Since July 2016, our region has received over just half of the normal rainfall that we would normally expect.
It's rained a lot where I live.
Well, apparently not.
Stockbroke-about. Honestly,
well, not according to
filling
these
up the
people.
buckets and everything.
Well, not according to the Affinity people, right?
Who's telling you this, for goodness sake?
This is a report which has come out from the Environment Agency, right? They've been telling water companies that in the coming months...
It's a load of old bollocks.
Well, this is what you're going to have to do, right? Householders are going to be advised to use a bucket and a sponge rather than a hose to clean the car. Swap baths for 4-minute showers and start planting drought-resistant bedding plants such as alyssum, geraniums, marigolds and petunias.
Oh, yeah?
So don't water your plants, right?
I water my plants with the dishwater from my sink.
Well, that's very good of you.
I do. I recycle it.
Well, that saves water then.
Yeah, I didn't think we had a water shortage.
Well, it's coming. I'm telling you, I'm ahead of the curve here.
Yeah, I'm
3.6 million people are going to be affected by this.
Yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, well,
groundwater sources have been affected by the low rainfall, which is where 60% of the water we supply to our customers comes from.
Yes.
The southeast of England has been severely affected by a lack of rainfall in recent months. Middlesex got just 2.6 millimetres of rain, which is just 6% of the country's long-term average.
Right, OK. See, the problem is, you go around building houses all over the place, you're going to have a drought eventually, because if you knock down one house, which, even if it's got 4 bedrooms and it's got a huge garden, and then you go and put up 32 flats on the same block, each of which needs a car parking space, but each of which needs... Most flats these days, new build flats, have 2 bathrooms.
Yes.
OK?
Yeah.
So you've then got like...
So you're using twice as much water just to use the bathrooms, presumably.
You've got 64 people using water in a house where 2 people used to use it, an old couple.
Although
right?
you say that, I mean, in your place, right, if you've got 2 bathrooms, you're only using 1 at a time. It's not like using 2.
No, but what I'm saying is, normally speaking, the reason you've got 2 bathrooms is you've got young couples living there, right? And they each have their own bathroom. Yeah. So that means that they're not even jointly using water in showers or anything like that.
Well, maybe they are at the start.
Maybe at the start, yeah.
So it gets boring.
Exactly. 2 completely separate bathrooms. So the water problem has never been thought through properly. When you stick block after block after block of flats into what you call brownfield,
brownfield sites.
Yeah, brownfield sites where you knock down houses and rebuild flats. Then you are gonna store yourself up with problems.
Yeah, right.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
There's no question of that. But the point is also, if you have a shortage of rainfall, which is what we apparently are having, because if you think about it, last winter...
See, I'm not aware of a shortage of rainfall.
Well, they're saying last winter was very dry, and it actually was. It didn't rain an awful lot. When you think of the winters that we have in this country...
heavy rain.
Yeah, but I always put it down to the days when I remember getting, because I hate being very wet. I hate getting, rained on in a massive way.
Yes.
And I would say I could count on one hand last winter the number of times I actually had to take the dog out and get soaking wet.
Right.
Didn't happen very much.
Right.
So that's what I gauge it on.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So by that token, I don't think it rained very much.
Okay, well, if you say so, I'll watch for that. Talking about places which are good to go and which aren't good to go.
Well, before you do that, did you not have an incident with your car being washed the wrong way or something the other weekend?
Shocking. Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely shocking.
Because you might have to see, the reason I'm saying that is because they were asking you to use a sponge rather than hosing it down.
I mean, listen, what happened was I go and get the car cleaned at the car wash because, of course, car wash companies are sometimes told to close down during droughts and they'll go out of business.
Well, I couldn't find one open last Sunday.
Well, they're all run by East European people who work very hard and do a really good
apparently
job.
Not after 3 o'clock on a Sunday.
I don't know when I got mine done. I think it was early. I think it was 10 o'clock on Sunday, actually.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I get it done immaculately, and I always pay them extra to do the wheels properly, okay?
Yes.
And so what happens is I'm driving through Stockbroker Belt, Surrey, and I come to a couple of bends on a very narrow road, so I'm going very slowly.
Yes.
Because I'm a responsible driver.
Are you?
And my car is wide.
News to me.
No, I am. So I come round this bend and I see ahead of me some, irresponsible, gardening type bloke.
Right. Well, luckily it wasn't Naked Gardening Day.
No, it wasn't Naked Gardening Day. Who is using a pressure hose to clean the entrance to the driveway of his master's home.
And you'd already had your car cleaned.
Had my car cleaned.
Yeah.
And I was on my way to somewhere where I wanted to turn up with a clean car.
Uh-huh.
So... Anyway, as I had to slow because the car was coming the other way, I'm almost stationary outside this guy's driveway when he turns round, blasts the ground in front of him, which is 1 foot from my car, and the filth that he's blasting out the ground went straight over the side of my car and my wheels.
Brilliant.
I was absolutely incandescent with rage.
I know. I wish I could have been there to see that.
Yeah,
that would have made me laugh hilariously.
It was an outrage.
Yeah.
But the problem was, this was in a part of Stockbroker Belt where there are no pavements. Yeah. There's just banks that come down to the road, narrow road. Right. And I had 3 cars behind me. I couldn't even stop to get out and remonstrate.
Well, there are no pavements. Well,
no pavements. There's no pavements.
I thought it was a relatively built-up area, though, isn't it?
No.
Not like the middle of nowhere.
No. This is down in Stockbroker Belt, proper. It's no problem.
Right.
I mean, when I say no pavements, there was no pavement on my side and a very narrow pavement on the other side. There's only a pavement on one side, if at all. Right. You see what I mean?
I got you.
So, and there was nowhere I could have stopped. There were 3 cars behind me.
So did it smash all over the window as well?
No, it splashed all over the side of the car and the wheels, but I could hear it going as it hit the car.
It's all like pebbles.
Yeah, it's like pebbles and
might have nicked the paint
and filth. Well, I've had a look at it. Fortunately, it didn't do any damage to the paint. But I mean, not an irresponsible and stupid action. So I felt, well, I'm going to go back later.
Get out and remonstrate with him.
Well, I couldn't. I couldn't stop the car because there was too much traffic behind me.
Wind the window down.
Well, no, because I'd moved on by then. Okay. You know, it's at 2 miles an hour beyond him. So I made plans to go back and sort the lout out later. But when I did and passed later in a taxi coming back from the place I was at, because there'd been some mild inebriation, I left my car there as a responsible motorist.
Of course.
Yeah. I told the guy to slow down because I was going to get this guy, but he'd gone. And the double doors, you know, the double gates, tall double gates, were locked.
Yes.
And I had to go and get my car cleaned again on Tuesday.
Unfortunate that.
Very angry.
And when you showed up for wherever it was you were going with a clean car, they must have thought, what on earth has this idiot been driving around in?
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
shocking
state.
Unbelievable.
Now, lots more coming up, including Sandro Manetti, of course, who's coming next. This is TalkSport.
Firing up a G-Funk, sipping on juice and gin. Just me and a friend, feeling kind of groovy, working on a movie. Yeah, right. But we did nothing, absolutely but kids that day. And I'll say, what the hell am I doing drinking in L.A. at 26?
This is TalkSport. We are the two mics, and I'm delighted to say it's time to check in with our good friend, Mr. Sandro Manetti, who is, of course, our favourite man in Hollywood. Even though after Trump has done away with Obamacare, he may have to hot-foot it back here now because he may not have health coverage anymore.
That's right.
Sandro, very good morning to you. Welcome.
I'm desperately trying to avoid injury.
So you should.
It's a great country, but it's not one to get sick in.
Well, it certainly isn't now. I suppose that Obamacare has been wiped away with a stroke, but we're not quite sure exactly how long it's going to take before anything actually changes, right?
Well, the next move is for the policy to go to the Senate, where they will ask for various changes before it gets kicked back to President Trump. But, normally everyone's talking about the showbiz gossip here, but, of course, with healthcare, it's all about how it affects you. And,
sure.
It just seems to be, everyone I speak to seems to have worked out it's going to cost an awful lot more money, so I'm not quite sure why that.
Well, yeah, it's a bit like everything that ever changes in America. It always ends up just costing you more money. Now, what about old HRH, the Duke of Edinburgh? Because we were, at about this time yesterday, being told that a big announcement was coming from Buckingham Palace. We weren't sure whether it had something to do with, a possible marriage with Prince Harry and his Hollywood lover, or whether it was something to do with, one of the royals and their ill health. But how's it been received over there?
Well, the American media seem to think it was automatically grave news because this time yesterday I was getting so many calls from American media outlets who automatically assume that because I'm British and live in America, I must be a royal expert, giving my opinions on the impending death of whatever royal was going to be announced. And I said, you might be jumping the gun a bit there, and happily, it wasn't grave news. It was Prince Philip stepping down from royal duties. As a result, I got absolutely no calls from the American media who thought that was very boring and not too interesting.
Okay, well, they're starting to lose their appreciation of the British royalty. They need to show more respect, Sandro. I'm not very happy about this. Now, Sandro, tell me this, please. Are our great Hollywood heroes losing their gilt-edged appeal? And I'm talking about the fact that Johnny Depp is going around moaning that people are ripping him off for hundreds of millions of dollars, and Brad Pitt is bombshell's post-divorce interview with GQ in which he reveals that he's been a drunk for most of his life.
Well, Johnny Depp also has a series of drink problems. We're talking about lawsuits with his representatives in that case, where they listed all the huge amount of money he spends each month on wine. And I thought no one could possibly dwarf that. But then Brad Pitt does own his own vineyard, which is pretty helpful if you like a drink. Yeah. And in this bombshell interview, which all Hollywood is talking about, he said that he loves vodka so much he can drink any Russian under the table.
That's right.
But
and that is a very big and bold statement to make.
Yeah.
If you've ever drunk vodka with Russians.
Have you drunk much vodka with Russians?
I have. A little bit. Porky's done more than me. But whenever I've met any Russians, it's very dangerous to get into a drinking competition with them.
Sandro, I once covered a story in which Boris Yeltsin met Bill Clinton in Vancouver, and they couldn't get Yeltsin off the boat because he couldn't see straight.
Well, no. I mean, I remember speaking to associates at the White House who told me that Yeltsin had wanted a pizza when he was staying at the White House, so he'd wandered out into the streets of Washington, and the Secret Service found him in some bar.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me.
Politicians, it's movie stars as well.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
Exactly right. But so I mean, is this surprising everybody that Brad Pitt has got such an appetite for the booze?
Well, we all knew about his appetite for the weed. He's been on the dodgy cigarettes, ever since he first got to Hollywood.
Yeah.
The alcohol was a new one.
Yeah.
But he said that he's now replaced his beloved wine and vodka with cranberry juice and fizzy water.
Cranberry juice.
And
God, I can't stand cranberry juice.
Juice.
God, I hate it.
It always reminds you of that scene from The Departed, really, doesn't it? You can't really get past it.
I don't know. You see, what I don't quite understand here, Sandra, is that Brad Pitt says he has been inebriated every day of his life for the last 25 years. Now, didn't some producer who's paying him $25 or $30 million to make a film work out that he might not have quite been with it sometimes? And it takes me back to the great story of J.R. Ewing, Larry Hagman, who used to drink a bottle of whiskey a day on the set of Making Dallas.
This is how Hollywood is and always has been. Yes, it might come as a surprise to a lot of people around the world, but for those of us in Hollywood, it's what you put up with. The greatest stars in Hollywood history. So many of them have been drunks, and they're just continuing a rich Hollywood tradition.
Yeah, I'm all in favour of it.
Johnny Depp was also.
Yeah.
Well, Porky's been living his life that way for many, many years, several decades, in fact. What about Miley Cyrus? She's been talking about giving up the weed as well.
Yeah, I mean, here's a new Hollywood star. She's only 24, but she's certainly had her demons, and she's preparing to release new music. But she's revealed, quote, "I've not smoked weed in 3 weeks. Which is the longest I've gone without it."
Yeah, my God. Yeah, what a sacrifice.
What do you want, a medal?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
She's also not drinking either. So, goodness me.
I don't know what sort of a life.
Young Hollywood, old Hollywood.
Yeah.
It's the drink and the drugs. It's sadly what fuels the industry.
I don't know what sort of life that is. Now, I understand quite soon, Sandro, that the new Baywatch movie's coming out. I am appalled that they've made it. I prefer to just grow old with the warm reflections of Pamela Anderson's beautiful body bouncing up and down across those beaches of California in that red swimsuit, and I don't want any imposters to now shatter those memories I had as a younger man.
Well, tough luck, because that imposter is Kelly Rohrbach, who is the new Pamela Anderson, and he's taking over her role as C.J. Parker, running in slow motion across the beach. And Baywatch, of course, a fantastic brand. And as we know, it's all about the brands in getting those international sales with movies. So, it's not enough that we have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson replacing David Hasselhoff. We have Kelly "The Boobs" Rohrbach replacing Pammy. She's an overnight star. Yeah. She's on the cover of the new Cosmopolitan. She's got a celebrity boyfriend. She's dating NFL quarterback Aaron Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers. And for a new generation, Kelly is going to be their Pammy.
Now, we were talking about Donald Trump a bit earlier. I was telling Porky that it's bizarre a statement that he made about his first trip abroad. He's going to go to Saudi Arabia, Israel, and according to his cardinals, who are going to be very happy, he's going to the Vatican. But Pope Francis is making his acting debut. Is there any connection to these two events?
Well, we spoke before about all these movie actors who have had a lot of wine. Pope Francis had a lot of communion wine over the years, but I don't think that's why he's been hired. He's actually been hired to be in an Argentinian film called Beyond the Sun, which is a spiritual drama about some kids following the lessons of the disciples. Pope Francis makes a cameo. This thing's got into the Cannes Film Festival. So I love it. He's the first Pope who's going to become a movie star.
Incredible. Well, he's quite a big football fan as well. Talking about football, by the way, I don't know whether you've been following the fact that Michael Eisner, the former CEO of Disney, is over here at the moment. He wants to buy Portsmouth, which is an extraordinary state of affairs, really,
isn't it? Certainly is.
Well, not really, because, a lot of people in the past have joked that Portsmouth was a Mickey Mouse operation, but now it's been a very well-run club put together by some sort of loving fans, rescued from the depths, free of much debt, unlike a lot of other football clubs. And Eisner certainly, is always good at spotting an opportunity and a potential success. When he ran Disney to huge success. And so I think this could possibly be a good thing for Portsmouth FC, because there's been plenty of terrible American owners in football down the years, but at least this one has got a track record, and I'm sure the halftime entertainment will be good, because here's someone who really understands the entertainment business, if not so much the sports world.
You do wonder, and I suppose finally we should tip our hats to Sharon Stone, who is at the age of 59 still looking for love.
Yes, she is. She was at a movie premiere last night with her 2 kids, and she was bemoaning the fact that her 16-year-old son, Rowan, is getting more dates than she is. She's 59, and in Hollywood, that's like being 129. And, she can't get a look in. So, I don't know if any of your listeners remember sort of Basic Instinct and want to give Sharon a call.
Yeah.
But she's middle-aged, free and single, and ready to mingle.
Yes. Well, that's very nice of you to mention. I'm sure Porky might take you up on that. Actually,
well, the FMP list might be revived. Yeah. That's the first Mrs. Parry for those who don't know Sandro.
Absolutely right. Well, listen, Sandro, we'll enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Yes.
Hopefully, you'll sort out your Obamacare scenario, and we'll talk to you soon.
I'll give you love to Sharon Stone.
Thank you very much indeed, Sandro.
Now, I think that's quite an interesting sort of juxtaposition of you and I. We were talking only yesterday when you were saying, you're still in the market, as it were. Imagine if you ran into Sharon Stone in a party somewhere.
Yes.
And it turned out that she was looking to be taken out for dinner.
Yeah.
And you could take Sharon Stone out for dinner.
Yes, that'd be good. Be great.
I think you might want to make yourself a date to get over to LA.
Well, you have to think about these things.
Yeah.
And by the way, your ambitions widen as you get older.
Do they?
Well, I couldn't have dreamed of doing that, say, 20 years ago, but now I feel...
See, I don't know. I think you're underplaying yourself.
Yeah, well,
you're underplaying yourself. How about this from Trevor, who says, there is a Cairo in both Illinois and Georgia in America. Well, both are preferable to live in or visit to Cairo in Egypt.
Well, that's a bit harsh on Cairo in Egypt. In America, there is the name of every city everywhere in the world. Somebody has gone to America and founded a city with the same name.
I don't think there's an Ulaanbaatar.
Well, there's probably not an Ulaanbaatar. Well, what was the one recently when, just to point out that there is a cultural ignorance in America?
I don't know.
Somebody talked about a town in America. I can't quite remember the story, and it was called something like some very famous capital.
You mean they'd sort of pronounced it incorrectly?
Well, it was like Prague or something like that,
right.
Or something like that. And whoever was talking in America sort of said Prague, and it was Prague, like Illinois or something like that. You know what I mean?
Like Paris, France.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But
Paris, Texas.
This Prague he was talking about was just down the road in Illinois, and somebody said, "Oh, is that Prague in Czechoslovakia?"
Yeah.
And he said, "What? They got one there too?" It was one of those sort of situations.
It was one of those, yeah. How about this from Proud Cannon, who says, it wouldn't surprise me if Porky is invested in the moving iceberg project. He seems very buoyed up by it.
Well, I think...
frozen plank.
Listen, what fascinates me is the world of technology when people are changing the world. And if you can drag 2 miles of water, because that's what an iceberg is, a frozen block of water, 2 miles long and 300 metres deep, and about, it looks like hundreds of feet across. If you can drag that from the Antarctic, not the Arctic, which is closer to the United Arab Emirates in the Northern Hemisphere, but from the Southern Hemisphere all the way...
Can't, though.
Well, no, they can. They can do it. They get just because you haven't seen it done doesn't mean you can't do it.
This French guy is a sham artist. He's been running this scam on the Saudis since...
I don't agree.
Since the 60s. You told me that.
I do not agree.
He has not managed to pull anything apart from the wool over their eyes.
If at first you don't succeed, try again.
Yeah, absolute cobbleros.
No.
This is Talk Sport.
No. I've seen a leaked report saying her fortune's gone up by 40 million over last year.
Right.
Do you know how old she is?
She's only about 25, isn't she?
29. 29. It's her 29th birthday. That's why I played that song.
Okay.
Yeah, but she's not yet reached 30, and she's one of the richest women in the world.
I didn't realise she was even that old.
Yeah, she is, Quite amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have any of her discs?
I do, actually. I have 2 of her vinyl discs. I have 21, which is one of the albums.
And 25?
And 25.
Ah, you see, I know him.
And I think I have a couple of tracks as well from the other album, which is called 19, I believe.
Okay, yeah. So, we've all heard Skyfall.
Yeah.
And then she's made one or two other sort of good singles, hasn't she?
She has.
But what do all the rest of the songs on her LP sound like?
Well,
they can't all sound the same, can they? All like ballady and
And they actually are. There's not too many of them which are anything other than that. I mean, if you've ever watched her doing, for example, she did Glastonbury last year.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw any of that on TV.
No, I didn't, no.
And most of her songs are basically her standing, singing, telling a story. There's not a lot of action going on. They're not very fast moving.
Yes.
It's not rock and roll, really.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I know what you mean.
And in fact, both the albums that I've got were bought for me. I didn't buy them.
See, somebody said to me, a lot of her songs sound quite the same because they're ballads and all that, but the quality of her voice is so pitch perfect.
She has a great voice,
you could listen to it forever.
Yeah.
And so, if she sung Skyfall for half an hour, you'd get bored.
Yes.
So better that she sings 3 or 4 different songs, even if they sound a bit the same, just to hear the quality of her singing.
I mean, what I would say to you is, because I've now got back into listening to vinyl, which is quite nice, because for a long time, you don't listen to more than one song by an artist because it's on a playlist or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So, because I got these vinyl albums, I thought to myself, right, well, I'll play the album from start to finish. And I listened to the first side, and I didn't want to turn it over.
Right.
Because one side was enough.
I see, yeah, of course.
Because I think if you don't want to listen to the whole thing, you know what I mean?
I totally agree.
So listen to, say, 4 or 5 songs, that's enough.
I totally agree.
And then you put something else on.
I totally agree.
Right.
Now, our good pal, Piers Morgan, okay. Now, I've got some figures here, right, and they're showbiz figures. And you know that the breakfast show he works on, was it GMTV? GMB. Good Morning Britain, that's right, yeah. Now, that was almost going down the plug hole altogether, because when Susan Reid took over, she was given the brief of, you've got to, get this audience up to somewhere near the BBC.
She was seen as a thinking man's sort of sex symbol, wasn't she?
Thinking man's crumpet is the way she's always described.
I don't want to say that
No,
word.
I know, because it's a horrible expression, but that's the way she's described. Yeah. So she goes to Good Morning Britain. Yeah. It had 329,000 viewers.
Yeah.
The latest figures, which are about to be released, show that they've now gone up to over 1 million.
Really?
1,061,000, in contrast to the BBC, which has 1.4 million.
Yes.
Now,
but is the BBC on the wane, though, would be the question,
Only 2% down. Only 2% down, 1.4 million. But the point is, what seems to be a little bit unfair, is that she has been given all the credit.
Yeah.
Susan Reid has been credited with bringing legions of viewers to the BBC's flagship breakfast show.
Away from it, you mean?
Well, no, when she was there, and that's and so she was kidnapped by ITV, sort of business-wise.
Yes.
Switched to ITV's Good Morning Britain. 3 years ago, it was pulling in 329,000 viewers. Last week, 1,061,000. Yes. Now, I think this is very unfair that so far they haven't mentioned our pal Piers Morgan.
Presumably they will, but I mean, I suppose they might say that he's only on it 3 mornings a week, isn't he?
Yeah, but it's still he must take a huge amount of credit for.
Well, there's no question that the
chemistry between the two of them.
Yeah, exactly. Is what people like to watch.
Exactly. So I think that's grossly unfair to make out that Piers had a little bit to do with it. It says last week 1,061,000 tuned in to watch her with co-presenter Piers Morgan.
Yes.
So that's on a day that Piers is working, right? So he's going for it.
Right.
So BBC. So anyway, this commentator says breakfast television has traditionally always been genteel, easy viewing, but Susanna and Piers have turned that on its head. They pull no punches in interviews and will probe at subjects until they get a great story or revelation, and this is clearly a hit with viewers.
Yes, it is.
While BBC Breakfast is still drawing great numbers, GMB's turnaround is a sore point with them.
BBC Breakfast people tend to watch and say they watch just because it's a sort of default position, isn't it?
Exactly.
But it's incredibly boring and sort of vanilla and basically uninteresting.
It was always very obvious to me from the moment Piers, made his debut on that and was sitting on the couch on the first day that this was going to work because Piers is a great personality. He's the sort of bloke you either kind of love or hate. Yeah. You either want him to fall on his face or you enjoy his great
and as we know,
outbursts and revelations.
As we often mention from the whole Howard Stern scenario, sometimes if you hate someone, you watch them more.
Yeah, maybe,
than if you actually like them.
But I think most people find him, with that twinkle in his eye, mischievous, insightful, and, his presentation delivery is lovely, because it's outgoing.
He's got a Fleet Street attitude.
Yeah, of course he has.
To stories.
Of course
he wants to get his hands dirty.
Absolutely.
He doesn't want to be told by some guy behind the camera what you should be saying and what you should be asking.
J'agree.
Indeed. Now, a couple of interesting little bits for you here.
Yes.
Adrian says, on the subject of funny cities, Bubba Watson is from Baghdad in Florida.
That's right, yeah. That's right, absolutely.
Hobbsy says, is the Egyptian doctor supplying Mr. Parry with cables from Cairo?
9.
And Kev says, towing icebergs was actually from a film called Brewster's Millions in the 80s. YouTube.
What do you mean?
Well, I think he's saying that's where this French guy's
What's
got
the
the
plot
idea
of
from.
Brewster Millions? Is it a guy who had to spend loads of money?
I can't remember.
I think it
It
was.
was quite a long time ago.
Wasn't he given like £3 million and he had to spend it in 24 hours or something in order to inherit his father's...
He had to spend $30 million.
Oh, $30 million.
And then to inherit 300.
I see, yeah, okay, yeah.
No.
Well, something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
That was Richard Pryor, wasn't it?
Yes, I think it was.
Man who used to go around setting fire to himself.
He only did that once, to be honest.
Yeah, well, you only want to do it once, really, wouldn't you?
Yeah, there was... but he did... I mean, he was very funny about it as well, after
Yes.
he came back from and recovered from having set himself on
Mass
fire.
burning,
Yeah, and the way he tells the story is fantastic.
Was it a crack pipe that blew up on him?
It was a crack pipe that blew up, and he was naked, right?
Yeah.
And he was smoking crack, and it was a bit like the Boy George situation, where he sold all his furniture,
right?
Because he'd broken it up to burn it or something.
Yeah.
And so he lived in this house, which was quite well to do in this neighbourhood of Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
But there was nothing in it. Because
Right.
he'd spent all the money on crack.
Yeah.
And when this thing exploded, he was on fire, naked, and he ran out into the street with sort of fire coming off him.
Yeah, like burning.
Yeah, burning.
He was like a cake that had just been lit, so to speak. Yeah,
because the ethanol which you use apparently
floats around your body,
to smoke the stuff had sort of spontaneously combusted.
Yes.
And it was all over him.
Yeah.
And he was very lucky to get out of it alive, to be honest.
Of course he was, yeah. Not
Incredible.
a good idea.
And the neighbours were a bit nonplussed, I think, to have this guy running down their neighbourhood.
Yeah, on fire.
Screaming on
Yeah.
fire.
Well, I'll tell you the other guy who did it, Sherry Blair's dad.
Oh, yeah?
Tony Booth.
Oh, Tony Booth.
Tony
yeah.
Booth.
Well, he wasn't a crack smoker.
He wasn't a crack smoker, but what he did was, and it's a bit of a mystery.
I used to see him in the Flask pub in Hampstead.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
That's
of
where he
course.
used to
Yeah.
drink.
Well, of course, he was in the original Alf Garnett program.
Yeah, Till Death Us Do Part.
Till Death Us Do Part. He was the cheeky Scouser son-in-law,
Scouser,
yeah. who was very left wing and like.
It was Una Stubbs' husband.
Yeah,
right?
support the unions from Liverpool and all that,
Right.
And he had some sort of an accident with an old-fashioned lighter in which you put like
an old Zippo or something.
Yeah, that's right. And didn't you used to buy like petrol in a can or something?
Yeah, you
it wasn't
did. Yeah.
petrol, was it?
Yeah,
What
it was petrol. It was actually petrol because you would pour it into the lighter.
That's right.
And make the gauze all wet.
Anyway, in deep in bottles of brandy and everything, he was like sitting in his chair. Apparently, it's the account I read.
Yeah.
And he gets this little yellow can with a red nozzle on the top, and you're supposed to stick it into the entrance of the lighter and squeeze it. Anyway, he didn't have the nozzle in, so he's squeezing it, thinking this is taking a lot of petrol.
Right.
But in fact, it was going all over his jumper and his trousers and everything.
Right.
And then when eventually he thought, I wonder if it's full yet, and he tried to light it. He turned it upside down, so any petrol in there fell out.
Yeah.
Clicked it, and boof, it all went up.
Unbelievable. Yeah, very dangerous business.
Yeah, exactly.
Smoking.
Yeah.
I'm surprised, in fact, that there haven't been more sort of smoking episodes in my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where things have happened and things have just gone on fire.
Yeah.
But amazingly, they haven't. David says the French built a nice, cool underground tube in Cairo. Don't know what. David says Porky mocks the Americans' lack of geographical knowledge and then says Czechoslovakia.
Well, I know it's not Czechoslovakia these days. It was in those days, that's
exactly.
all. Yeah.
And he also says no one can replace the Hoff. I saw him doing a show in a Melbourne pub a couple of years ago. He's a great singer as well.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say he's a great singer. He's a great entertainer, I suppose.
He's a great entertainer because he tells life stories as well about, being so inebriated.
Well, do you remember was there not a video of him
crawling around on the floor trying to find food
by his daughter?
Yes, that's right.
When he was absolutely completely bladderated.
Gone, yeah.
Couldn't see what was going on.
Terrible.
Richard says Porky Warm Reflections of Pamela Anderson probably isn't the best title for your memoirs.
No, it's probably not. No, you're absolutely right.
Yes.
But it's an astonishing programme, Baywatch, when it first started. Nobody had ever thought about it like that.
No.
It just worked. It's one of those great, like Miami Vice worked and, Downton Abbey worked.
Yeah.
Somebody comes up with an idea and bang, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Have you noticed, by the way, how quickly Downton Abbey has gone out of fashion in the sense that every actor in Downton Abbey, you said to yourself, wow, they're made for life now, they're in Downton Abbey.
Right.
I haven't seen one of them do anything worth...
A couple of them have, I think.
Worth a pinch of salt since. Some of them have done some stage stuff, a little bit of that, but none of them have been commissioned to great films or anything.
I'm sure a couple of them have been in other TV shows, though, because I remember just reading about them.
Well, one of them, who was the maid, whose husband was not the butler, he was
the one who was accused of killing someone.
Yeah, that's right. The guy who went to jail.
Yes.
What was his name?
I can't remember.
He was the valet. He was the valet to the Lord.
Yeah.
His wife, the little blonde, I saw her in a 3-part series in which she played some evil murderess who was killing children with arsenic.
Right.
And it was appalling.
Right.
I couldn't watch it after the first episode.
Yeah.
It was dreadful.
No, I know. That's the problem.
Yeah.
That is the problem. But more of that to come, of course. And Porky quiz time in the next hour.
Yes.
And it's on the Duke of Wellington.
Yes.
This is Talk Sport.
Yes.
This is Talk Sport. We are the Two Mites. There will be a podcast coming out a little bit later on. We will be back, of course, tomorrow on the warm-up, which is from 11 o'clock, ahead of all the big football matches over the course of the weekend. Some quite important football matches over the course of the weekend, of course. And we've got live commentary of 3 of them, including yours, by the way, Swansea against Everton.
That's right.
And I think I mentioned this to you the other day, and I just thought I should reiterate it. If it turns out that Bobcat Bob was fired in error, and in fact Mr. Clements does not keep Swansea up,
Yes.
what do you think that means? Does that mean that Bobcat Bob should have been left there to just be allowed to try and get it right, maybe?
Well, it's impossible to predict. I mean, he would have had to have reversed the fortunes of the club dramatically to get off the slippery slope he was on. So they decided to stop the slippery slope and bring a new man in who had some initial success. Limited, but nevertheless better than that went before.
He did.
But if he goes down as well, you're absolutely right in saying it was the most pointless sacking and new appointment in last season's, this season, obviously, this season's Premier League.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
And it was the begining of the sort of first round of sacking of managers, really, wasn't it? But, I mean, for me, the big games this weekend are, I mean, there's one tonight, isn't there? Spurs going to West Ham.
That's right.
And there's a big piece on the back of one of the papers which says, unbelievably, right, if Tottenham win tonight, they'll be 41 points ahead of sorry West Ham.
I know. And
that's hard to believe, isn't it?
It's very hard. Well, it's easy to believe when you look at the relative form of the two teams. But what I find, I mean, I'm not a London boy, right?
Yes.
So, I know the difference between Everton and Liverpool in terms of rivalries and all that.
Yeah.
But it says here that West Ham Spurs is the greatest rivalry in London.
Yeah.
Well, that can't be right.
That can't be.
The greatest rivalry has to be Arsenal and Spurs.
Arsenal, Tottenham, you would think, yeah. I would have thought so.
But
to be honest.
This says, no, this is much more bitter. It has been for years. And it might have something to do with Jimmy Greaves leaving Spurs and going to West Ham, and some
there's people writing about all sorts of things like the lasagna gate and all that kind of stuff that went on before.
Yes.
But I, as a kid, remember going to football matches, and I certainly remember that, going to West Ham was always quite an interesting experience because, it was always quite a difficult place to go.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I never thought of West Ham Tottenham as a bigger rivalry than
I didn't.
Tottenham Arsenal.
I didn't, not under any circumstances. When you think of what wound up the Spurs fans most of all, and to this day still holds, because apparently he hasn't been invited to the dinner to celebrate the end of White Hart Lane, is the transfer of Sol Campbell from Tottenham to Arsenal.
There couldn't be anything more vitriolic.
No, exactly. By the way, when you look at the Premier League table, which I was studying today, because we have other duties in life, don't we, which regard giving people our views on football and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
I mean, this has occurred to me, obviously, in the last week or so, but the gap between the top 7 and the rest of the Premier League is 14 points.
Yes.
Now, Everton are 7th, and they were able to say 2 weeks ago Everton will be playing in Europe next season in the Europa League, because the gap between them and the next team down, West Brom, is so huge it now can't be breached.
But that's because, in a way, there are a couple of those, what I would call kind of caverns between different groups, aren't there? Because
big steps.
There's something similar sort of midway down around about 10th as well.
That's right.
And no matter how many, I mean, Everton have had this problem, no matter how well they've played this season.
They couldn't get above 6.
They couldn't get above 6 because there was just too much of a gap to make up. Which is weird, isn't it?
It's very weird. I've never seen such a huge gap between people for years have been saying there's 3 divisions within the Premier League.
Yeah.
The top 4 or 5 usually,
yeah.
then the middle 10, and then the bottom 4.
I think that's right.
This season,
I think it might even be 4.
Well, this season it's completely different. It's the top 7, quite clearly, then a 14-point gap down to, as you quite rightly say, about number 16, and then a gap which strands those teams, and it's 3 out of 4.
Crystal Palace...
3 out of 4 to go down.
I mean, Crystal Palace, who are sort of 5th from bottom, have got a 4-point cushion on the nearest team to them, which is Hull.
That's right.
They could win this weekend, and that would pretty much dispatch Swansea down into the Championship, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
Fascinating stuff.
It is fascinating stuff. Now, I want to tell you about a really good story, a good heart-rendering story.
Oh, yeah.
And that is, you know how much that I look after wildlife and all this kind of stuff.
Well, I know how much you say you look after it.
No, that's unfair to say. I dedicate a lot of my life to making sure that all God's creatures are, given a good time if I've got anything to do with it. Now, there's this place called Burton Fleming, which is in Yorkshire.
Is it?
Yeah, it's sort of down the coast a bit from Scarborough.
Okay.
And what happened is they got invaded by, you won't believe it, hedgehogs. Burton Fleming, East Yorkshire, population 450, excuse me, has suddenly acquired another 52 residents.
Oh, yeah.
They've had to make drastic modifications, feeding stations, little ladders providing routes out of ponds and holes at the bottom of fences to allow the influx of hedgehogs to move around the village in order to find their food.
Okay.
The hedgehogs have settled in so well they've been hailed as the best thing that's ever happened to the community.
Really?
Now one of the first villages in Britain to declare itself a hedgehog-friendly zone.
Yes.
Is hoping the rest of the nation will follow its example in boosting numbers of what is a very endangered species.
That's correct.
Excuse me. The message is timely as it's Hedgehog Awareness Week, right, starting today.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And an education campaign has been promoted by the British Hedgehog Preservation Society.
I see.
You didn't know it was hedgehog preservation.
I had no
Day,
idea.
did you?
But funnily enough, hedgehogs were the subject of a conversation I had at the weekend because there are people who take the view that farming in this country is not very animal friendly, right? There are people who say, well, it's all very well saying that they make their living off the land and all of that.
Yes.
But they don't always treat animals perhaps in the way that they should.
That's right.
Right, now there's a farm not a million miles away from where I am in Sussex.
Yes.
And as I walked the dog around there, I came across this massive big pile of sort of wood and trees that have been chopped down.
Right.
And it looks like a big mess, really. And you kind of think to yourself, well, what are they doing about this? What is the point of it? And I was talking to somebody who was also walking a dog. And I said, what are they doing here? Because some of the wood looks like it could be used for firewood.
Yeah.
Some of the trees look like they could be done something with other than just left in this big pile.
Right.
He said.
What?
He said what they're going to do is they're going to let all the creatures crawl inside this sort of collective mess and hibernate for the winter.
Right.
And then they're going to set fire to it.
What, to deliberately kill the animals?
Yeah.
Why?
Because that's what they do. Because they don't want these kinds of animals, which would include hedgehogs, which would include probably rats, maybe.
Rats I can
mice.
Understand you'd want to get rid of, but you should do it in a much more humane way
but
than
it doesn't sound very nice, does it? Now,
Where is this near where you live?
Not far away, yeah.
That's horrible.
It is horrible.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
Well,
and also, I can also tell you that in Scotland, not that long ago, and I think I mentioned this to you before, they had a hedgehog cull on the island, I think, of Skye, because the hedgehogs...
many of them?
There were too many of them, but they were also eating the eggs of birds which were protected as well, and it was a case of stopping the hedgehogs from killing off the birds.
That's terrible.
Yeah. So it's a very delicate balance.
Well, it is a delicate balance. I mean, let me tell you the other side of that, right? There's people have volunteered to be hedgehog carers, okay? Yeah. So one woman called Sue Curvin,
right,
who has become a carer for
How could you be
hedgehogs.
A carer for a hedgehog?
Well, the hedgehogs have invaded this little village, right? And they said we're so glad to see them because for instance, this woman, Mrs. Curvin, she is a foster carer for hedgehogs, right? She has built a pond in her back garden. It's got ladders so the hedgehogs can get up and down from, paddling around in the water.
Right.
Homemade hedgehog house and a hole drilled into the neighbouring stone wall, never mind a fence, so the hedgehogs can get through to the next garden if they can't find food in her garden.
Okay, right.
She said it's wonderful, and the amazing thing is she's got grown-up children who've never seen a hedgehog.
Yeah, well, a lot of people haven't seen a hedgehog. I mean, I haven't seen many. I think I've only seen about 3 hedgehogs in my life.
I saw that. I saw hedgehogs when I was a kid, without a doubt, but I haven't seen one for decades, literally. Yeah?
Okay.
She says there's still much more work to be done. Residents are saving up for signs to put in the village reading "Slow down, hedgehogs," to go on every wheelie bin and main road into the village.
Yeah, well, nobody's going to pay any attention to that.
The People's Trust for Endangered Species has found that numbers of rural hedgehogs has fallen by 50% since the year 2000. Wow, that's not long. That's only 17 years.
That's right.
It blames a decline in the area of land available for feeding and nesting, coupled with increased competition for food from larger mammals such as badgers.
Yes. But they're never going to get people to slow down going into villages because of hedgehogs. I mean, you can get them to slow down because of school. Yeah. You can put speed bumps in and say come down at 20 miles an hour. Yeah. But not for hedgehogs. That's not going to happen.
Well, I'm not sure about that. Where my ducks are, we have a sign on the approach to the village and to the ponds, which you can see as you approach the village.
And what does it say?
It says, "Please slow Swans Crossing."
Really?
Because the swans, when they have their signets, they don't actually have them near the pond. They have them across the road on a meadow behind the trees for safety reasons, you know?
Right.
Although I can't say how safe there with foxes about.
No, indeed.
But anyway, there we are.
I've got somebody sending me the true story of what actually happened to Mr. Booth when he burned himself almost to death.
Oh, yeah.
Tony Booth. I'll bring that to you very shortly.
Excellent.
This is Talk Sport.
Mm.
Where is my mind? Where is my mind? Where is my mind?
This is Talk Sport. Gift Gaff says this. Tony Booth had been to the Bull and Bush without his flat keys and in his drunken state. It says, and the piece he sent me here, it says that he nearly burned to death in November 1979 when, during a drunken attempt to get into his locked flat, he fell into a drum of paraffin.
Oh, really?
Which is even worse, isn't it? Than actually
much worse than the version I was told about.
He spent 6 months in hospital. He must have somehow set fire to himself and needed 26 different skin graft operations.
Good God.
Now, this is very, very badly written, this, because you'll see why in a moment. He says, shortly after his discharge from hospital, he went to visit his old flame, Coronation Street actress Pat Phoenix.
Yeah, right.
It's a bit unfortunate, that, isn't it?
But she died of cancer.
She did.
In a hospital.
Well, she took him in. They nursed him back to full health. They lived together for 6 years, but she then had her own problems with health, and she died of cancer
that's right.
In 1986.
I know, it was very sad indeed, yeah. Oh, well, the version I was given then was somebody's romantic account of how it could have happened.
Well, it may have been something that happened again, or another occasion.
How do you fall into a vat of paraffin?
That's a very interesting question.
You know, I mean, wouldn't you close the lid if there was a vat of paraffin around? And who keeps vats of paraffin in their garden?
Well, do people not use paraffin for strange things? Like, not only you don't just use it as, I say, heating device. Yeah. Do you not use it for cleaning things sometimes?
Well, maybe they did. I remember as a kid, by the way, a bloke used to drive around with tins of paraffin on the back of his cart or his lorry, his open back lorry, and everybody took in paraffin in those days because everybody had heaters in the house which basically looked like a big drum.
Yes.
And you put the paraffin in the bottom and then it soaked into a wick and you turned a little knob to get the wick up.
Was there not a little, like a paraffin man that used to appear on the van that everybody drove around in?
Yeah, pink paraffin.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, pink paraffin, that's right, yeah. Yeah, I remember at the local garage.
Terribly dangerous.
Oh, shockingly dangerous.
Yeah.
How half the houses in the world weren't burnt down when paraffin was around, I've no idea.
Yeah, incredible.
Because, I mean, old... what's his name? Rockefeller made his first fortune out of Standard Oil, didn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
But that was actually paraffin. It
was it?
Yeah.
It wasn't Standard Oil as in proper like petrol coming out of the ground.
No, and I'll tell you why. Because it wasn't initially to fuel motor cars and internal combustion engine. It was initially for heating in houses, heating and light.
Right.
It was heating and light, and the lights in the houses in New York, for instance, where a lot of houses were made of wood in those days. Were paraffin lights, okay?
Right, okay?
So you put the paraffin into a container on the ground, and then it soaked up a wick into the light,
right?
And then you lit the light. Now, the way that Rockefeller tried to stop the introduction of electricity, which I think was the patent of the man who invented the merchant bank, and I remember which one it is now. I mean, he became a multi-billionaire family as well.
Carnegie or Mellon or
no, Carnegie was the steel man.
Right.
This guy invented...
Mellon?
No, it wasn't Mellon. No, I'll remember it. It was one of the most famous merchant banks, which is still going.
Right, okay.
And he bought the patent on electricity, and then Rockefeller started this massive publicity campaign telling everybody...
Yeah.
Electricity will burn your house down.
Right.
These wires burst into flames.
Right.
And this was a guy.
They may well have done, I suppose.
This was a guy who was filling wooden houses in New York full of paraffin every day. You know what I mean? It was amazing.
Some of the most dangerous things that were done in those days. I mean, when we used to go on camping holidays with my parents, we only did it a couple of times.
Yeah.
But we went to Italy, and my dad used to hire these massive big tents from Blacks of Greenock up on Holborn, High Holborn there.
Right. Okay.
Because you didn't want to buy one.
I don't blame if you use it once a year.
We always rented it, right?
Yes.
But you'd sit in these tents, and you'd have camping gas cookers.
Yeah.
Basically, which was a naked
that's right.
flame.
Inside a canvas tent.
Inside a canvas tent,
right, yeah.
naked flame.
Yeah.
Attached to a cylinder full of gas.
Yes.
And you'd sit there and cook stuff, and you'd think this is fine. And you'd also have a camping gas light that was fired up by a match.
That's right. Yeah.
And I mean, we could have all been torched to death.
I mean, even the Native Americans, when they built their tepees, had a hole in the roof.
Exactly.
Because they constructed it with the branches of the trees to interlock to each other to leave a gap for the smoke to go out.
Exactly. Yeah, we didn't do any of that.
Yeah, well, it wasn't good planning, was it? But then again, it was your old fella.
That's true, yeah, exactly right. And we also, of course, didn't have any seatbelts in the back of the car.
No.
We drove all the way across Europe.
Yeah, I can imagine that as well.
Vicky says this, Swansea have to stay up. 2 words, Fernando Llorente. I know it's utterly sexist, but damn, what a mighty fine man he is, she says.
Who?
Fernando Llorente.
Is he a good man?
I think Vicky quite likes him.
Glad to hear about that. Yeah. Listen, I'll tell you what starts tonight because I'm putting on my...
Rothschild, says Scottish Bull.
Rothschild, yeah, that's him.
Rothschild.
That was Rothschild, yeah, thanks very much, yeah. Putting my hat on as one of the media world's leading TV reviewers, okay? So what are you laughing for?
What would you say, leading?
Well, don't you think so?
No, I don't. I think what we've managed to do is get you as far up the ladder of success on the TV reviewing front as we can.
You think so?
But I'm not sure I'd describe you quite yet as one of the leading lights.
Right. Well, Jamestown starts tonight.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a fantastic series, I hope, about the men who invented America.
Uh-huh.
And the first story is, I can tell you this in advance. I mean, Jamestown, of course, is in Virginia,
yes.
so it was the ultimate colonial town. And these guys all went over there. I suppose they got off the old...
Pilgrim types.
Yeah, Pilgrim types, the Mayflower.
Yeah.
And then realised that after 13 years, they didn't have any women. So they had to...
After 30 years it took them to
13,
work that out.
13.
13, all right.
And they thought, well, if we're going to create a community, we need women.
Better get some in.
So what they did is they actually sent a ship back.
Yes.
And advertised for women to come back to the Americas.
Oh, what? So back to Britain then?
No, they sent a ship back to Britain,
right,
to Bristol.
Okay.
And then went around almost press-ganging women in the same way that the Royal Navy used to press-gang sailors and said, look, you need to, for the sake of the country, you've got to come to Jamestown. Yeah. We've got to start producing children.
And were there any enthusiastic takers for this?
Yeah, loads of them,
really?
Apparently. Yeah, the money offered was pretty good and all this kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
You
so they didn't have to knock it even on the head?
Well, I don't think so, but it's all going to be revealed in this thing tonight. It's on Sky One, and but it's been flagged up as a really well-made and historically
accurate.
Well,
there's been a lot of
and perfect program.
I've seen a lot of adverts for it, and it certainly looks quite well put together.
Have you been? Have we had this discussion about going down to the colonial town?
Yes, I think so.
Because I went down to Williamsburg.
Williamsburg, yes.
When Prince Charles arrived with
Diana.
Yeah, with Diana, that's right. Because there's a college there called the College of William and Mary.
Yes.
And that was King William and Queen Mary who founded it in colonial times.
To be honest, I can't remember if we talked about it on the air, but you and I have talked about it, because I had a friend who actually went to William and Mary College. Oh. And I went and visited him there, yeah.
Oh, I see. Right, okay. Well, when they arrived, of course, the whole of the Fleet Street mob of royal correspondents arrived. What a bunch they were, really.
They were great.
Jimmy Whittaker.
They were great.
Richard Kay.
Richard Kay,
Richard Kay from the Mail, Jimmy Whittaker from the Mirror.
Ken Gavin, the photographer.
Ken Gavin, all the photographers.
Robert Jobson.
Rob Jobson, yeah.
Charlie Ray in those days, maybe?
Yeah, I think Charlie was working for the Star, wasn't he?
Sun, maybe?
The Sun, the Sun, Star of the Sun, yeah. And it became, like a huge party.
Harry
over
Arnold.
a couple of days. Harry Arnold, yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, the papers won't do that anymore.
No.
Because you just don't need it. You've got to remember that the photographers in those days had what was called film in their cameras. They had to take pictures, and then they had to go and find a laboratory, which they usually set up in their own
But also
bedrooms.
Diana in those days, any picture of Diana was a selling picture.
Of course it was, yeah.
Because you could always get rid of it.
Yeah, I agree. But the technology was so backward in those days. These days, we could take a picture on our phone of Diana, and it could shoot up on a screen in a newspaper newsroom in London within 30 seconds.
Well, the most famous picture I think you might remember from Kate and William's trip down to Australia was when they were walking towards, I think, a helicopter or something like that, and their skirt blew up.
That's right,
and somebody caught it on their mobile phone.
That's right.
And that was the only picture that everybody wanted to see.
What, who was that?
Of Kate Middleton. Before, I think it was
Kate Middleton, I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought you were saying Diana. No, you're right. You're absolutely right, yeah. Right. You're absolutely right. Whereas in those days, you were lucky to be able to get a picture back in one day.
Yeah.
I mean, quite seriously, you put it on a drum, you had to send it back, and
But it did get better, didn't it? But certainly
it got better, but it was still very, very antiquated.
Also, because of the fact that they were the ones that pretty much controlled the release of all the pictures, they could hold on to stuff and go, "Well, we're going to release it tomorrow," or "We're going to release this is what we're going to give you today," and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, they could. Yeah.
But I mean, it's a fascinating part of the world. All that
it is
those Civil War battlegrounds and all that kind of stuff.
If you go to Williamsburg, most of the people in Williamsburg live their life.
Yeah.
In an historical bubble because their job is to walk around in a British Army uniform or to walk around like a lady who lived in Williamsburg in 1683.
Yes.
And so they wear a bonnet and a long dress, and that's their job. That's their life.
I went to a similar place in Connecticut, funnily enough, on one of the trips I made relatively recently with the kids.
Yeah.
Because they had this village up in Mystic, Connecticut, where Mystic Pizza was made, the movie,
Yeah, okay,
And they've got an old sort of town, which is from those times, and they've got people living in it.
That's right.
And you go around and you talk to them, and they're cooking stuff, and,
exactly.
it's quite weird.
Exactly. Like the blacksmith looks like a guy who was living 300 years ago, and he's shoeing a horse and all that kind of stuff.
And he has to talk to you in character.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
it's quite odd.
It is very odd. Yeah, very odd indeed. Yeah.
Very, very odd. Anyway, we've digressed slightly from various
We certainly
things.
have. Yeah.
The local election results are coming in. We're going to bring them to you as and when there's anything interesting to tell you.
Exactly.
Which at the moment it doesn't appear to be.
Exactly.
But there will be, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Coming up next, though, it's time for the Porky Quiz.
Indeed.
To be that song, really, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
You want to wait for the chorus?
We won the war.
I must confess.
Waterloo.
As I was,
I'm going to love you forevermore.
I have to remind you, of course, that this is a Porky Quiz, not on ABBA, not on Waterloo, but on the Duke of Wellington. But it's very funny, actually, because this afternoon, as I was thinking about what the questions might be like,
that's right.
All I could sing, all I had in my head was the song Waterloo.
Answer to the first question, Agnetha Falstock.
Well, we shall see. I've got the questions here.
Answer the second question, Bjorn.
I mean, as you know, I have nothing to do with the questions. They are in this envelope here.
Yeah, that's the first set. Where's the second set?
There is no second set. I'm going to open it. I'm going to open it now.
Number of times I've been cheated and turned over on this one.
You can watch this live, by the way, on Facebook, and I've just put the link out on Twitter.
I shall repeat that so people can
watch it.
Yeah.
So there we are. One sheet of questions. There we are.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you say.
Right now, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
For question number one. Now, if you get one right, you will hear this sound.
Right.
There's only one way to win a campaign. Shout, shout, and shout again.
Right, is that the right one?
That's if you get one right. If you get one wrong, you will hear this sound.
Now that I discover the truth, I'm disposed to beat you to death.
Now, I can't obviously say too much about where that comes from, just in case it suddenly finds its way into the quiz.
Okay.
But are you ready for question number one?
I'm ready.
When did the first Duke of Wellington die? When did the first Duke of Wellington die?
The first Duke of Wellington?
Yeah.
Well,
Well, I mean, the first Duke of Wellington, the Duke of Wellington. I mean, he's
the Duke of Wellington. Yeah. Wellesley, who he was born as Wellesley. He was the first Duke of Wellington.
Well, I can't help you out with that.
And he died. He died. Well, he was born in 69. He was 83. So 69 to 49. So he died in 1852.
I can give you that.
Yes?
I need I'll have to ask for a month as well.
Okay. He was born on May Day, and he died in... it was either September or November, and I think it was definitely 1852, and I think... I'm going to say September.
Yeah, well done. You just saw that on a bit of paper, didn't you?
What bit of paper?
You just looked down.
I didn't look down. There's no paper here.
I'll
September 1852.
Correct.
Thank you.
There's only one way to win a campaign.
Whoa.
Shout and shout again.
Well, I just
See, you were trying to take half a point off me, weren't you?
No, I wasn't.
Yes, you did. I got 1852, and then you said, and the month. Otherwise, you've only given me half.
Because the answer says the 14th of September 1852. Yeah. Technically, you should have given me the whole date. Otherwise, you wouldn't have got it.
Come off it.
Question number 2.
Right.
Wellington was Prime Minister twice during his political career.
Yeah.
Under which monarchs did he serve?
2 monarchs. Yeah, because what? Yeah, that's right. Okay, he was Prime Minister for 3 years the first time, and then 3 years later, just for about 3 or 4 weeks. The 2 monarchs were, believe it or not, I think they were. I'm thinking aloud now. Aloud. The kings were William and George. And I have a feeling from the back of my brain, because I'm an expert on this subject, I think they were both the 4th. So I'm going to say, I was thinking aloud, I'm not going to put it into an answer, William the 4th and George the 4th.
Correct.
Hooray!
There's only one way to win a campaign. Shout and shout again.
2 out of 2. Question number 3.
Yeah.
In 1799, Wellington was appointed governor of 2 Indian cities.
Yeah.
What were they?
I'm thinking aloud again now. I think one was called Sampanara, and the second one, and the reason was his brother became governor of India of a state.
We're not interested in any of that rubbish.
So hang on, I'm thinking aloud here. You've got to allow my thinking pattern to work.
No, because otherwise we'll run out of time.
No, don't destroy my thinking pattern.
Why not?
That's a ploy to
to
make me fail.
You've only on third question. We're already halfway through the time slot.
Right, I'll say the 2. You want 2 cities?
2.
Sampara and Delhi.
Incorrect.
No.
Now that I discover the truth, I'm disposed to beat you to death.
Mysore or Seringapatam.
That's the one I was going to tell.
That's not what you said, though, is it?
No, but it's close. It
wasn't close enough.
Yeah.
That's 2 and 3. Yeah. Question number 4.
Yeah.
The Peninsular War pitted Napoleon's empire against the Allied powers of which 3 countries?
The Peninsular Wars.
Yes.
Obviously, right. Well, the Peninsular Wars took place in Portugal. So it was Portugal and... where did Napoleon get involved in that? The end of the Peninsular Wars. It must have been... there were 4 countries, actually.
That's 3.
Well, it was Portugal, Spain, Germany and France.
That's incorrect.
No, it's not.
It's incorrect.
It's not.
It's not. Portugal, Spain and Britain.
What?
Wellington was involved. Why didn't you say Britain?
No, sorry. What was the question?
The question says the Peninsular War pitted Napoleon's empire against the Allied powers of which 3 countries? Which was Britain, Spain,
I got
and
the
Portugal.
question the wrong way round.
Well, you answered
I read
it wrong.
for you to say, who were we fighting in the Peninsular Wars?
No. You said Spain and Portugal and Germany and France.
No, what was the question again?
The Peninsular War pitted Napoleon's empire against the Allied powers of which 3 countries?
Yeah.
So who was Napoleon fighting?
Well, he was obviously fighting
Britain, Spain and
the English.
Portugal.
What?
Well, you didn't say it right.
English, Spain and Portugal.
No.
I said it took place in Portugal.
No, incorrect.
No, it was a rubbish question.
I'm disposed to beat you to
2 out of
death.
4.
Rubbish question.
Question number 5.
I got that right.
Please listen to the question, and then you will be able to answer it properly.
Right, we'll read out the question properly in a clear voice and don't mumble.
All right, I won't. Number 5.
Yes.
Are you ready?
Yes.
The Duke's warhorse Copenhagen was most famously rode at the Battle of Waterloo.
Yeah.
It was sired by a former Derby winner. Can you name him?
No, because that's a ridiculous question.
Why?
To ask who was the mother of the Duke of Wellington's horse?
The father.
Yeah, who was the father of Duke of Wellington's horse? That's the most stupid
you didn't
question.
listen to the question, did you?
Go on, ask it again.
Well, you said you wanted him. It's not the mother. It was sired by a former Derby winner. Can you name him?
The most ridiculous question you've ever asked me in any quiz.
I don't think so.
Who was the father of the Duke of Wellington's horse?
Well, you know the horse is a famous horse, right?
I knew the horse Copenhagen.
Yeah.
That should have been the question. What was the name of his horse in the Battle of Waterloo?
Well, that would have been a stupid question.
No, it wouldn't.
I want to know what his father was called.
Rubbish question.
Well,
Impossible to answer. I can't answer
Have
it.
a guess.
No, because it's a ridiculous question.
Well, think of the name of the horse and think of something that might be related to it, because it's in Denmark, right?
No, because, I mean, there's millions of horses' names registered all over the world. Copenhagen was the name of the horse.
Yeah.
I suppose its father could have been called, Denmark or something like that.
Is that your answer?
Yes.
Incorrect.
Now that I discover the truth, I'm disposed to beat you to death.
It was John Bull. It's quite famous in a horse, that, actually. Question
John
number 6.
Bull, it's not even Danish.
Hey?
It's English.
The horse wasn't Danish. It was just called Copenhagen.
Ridiculous question. See, I got the first 2 right, and all of a sudden, the questions just come from list number 2.
Well,
as usual.
don't have a list. This is the same. No, this is the list.
Come on, just get on with it. You're wasting time.
Question
now.
number 6. Who hailed Wellington as the last great Englishman?
This would be... Now then, some famous composer wrote a great... No, I know who this is.
You know who it is?
Thinking aloud.
Go on.
This was... I think it was the poem that was written for his funeral by Alfred Lord Tennyson.
Correct.
Hooray!
There's only one way to win a campaign.
You see, as soon as I complain about the bum questions, you go back to the original
What are you
list
talking about?
of normal questions.
Have you gone completely bonkers?
Come on, get on with it.
I've got one sheet of paper here, which everybody who's watching this
I don't
currently
believe it. I
can
don't
see.
believe it. I don't
Whether
believe
you want to believe me or not, that's what it is. And you can see the correct marks and the incorrect marks.
Right, come on, get on with
You've
it.
currently got 3 out of 6. Question number 7.
Yeah.
Wellington's father's name was Garrett Wesley. What was his title?
Garrett Wesley?
Yes.
He was the Duke of somewhere, and I think he was the Duke of Garrett Wesley. Don't know what this has got to do with Waterloo and the Duke of Wellington.
The Duke of Wellington's dad. I think it has something to do with the Duke of Wellington.
You've got an obsession with fathers in this. You've asked me for the father of Wellington's horse. I mean, this is nonsense. He was the Duke.
Father of the horse.
He was the Duke of Derbyshire.
Incorrect.
No.
Now that I discover the truth, I'm disposed to beat you to
He
death.
was the first Earl of Mornington, actually.
Earl of Mornington.
Question number 8.
Where's Mornington?
Well, if you know your history, you will know that he was an Anglo-Irish family.
Yeah, I know they're an Anglo-Irish family. That's Dublin he was born.
Yeah.
Right, get on with
that
it.
may come up in another question.
Get on with it.
In 1806, Wellington returned to England and married Kitty Pakenham and was elected an MP.
Yeah.
In which constituency?
He represented... he had 2 constituencies in the same place. And the place was, I'm thinking aloud now, was the Isle of Wight. And he was MP for the Isle of Wight. But it was a merged constituency, Cowes and the Isle of Wight.
Incorrect.
No,
Now
it's
that
not.
I discover the truth, I'm disposed to beat you to death.
Rye in Kent.
No, that's wrong.
Right. It's
No, it's not. It's Rye on the Isle of Wight.
Well, it's Rye.
Mike, it's Rye on the Isle of
Well,
Wight.
I've got Rye here.
There is a Rye on the Isle of Wight.
I know there is.
Well, it was
Is
Rye.
you sure it's not Ride on the Isle of Wight?
No.
I think it's a Ride.
It's not. It's Rye
Well,
on the
I'll
Isle
have
of
that
Wight.
one checked.
Yeah.
I've been told it's Rye in Kent.
No, definitely not.
Okay, well, I'll check
No,
that. At the
no.
moment, it's incorrect. You have 3 out of 8. Number
No,
9.
yeah.
In March 1829,
Yeah.
Wellington fought a duel over Catholic emancipation. Who was his adversary?
In when?
1829.
1829?
March, yes.
In March 1829.
Yeah, he fought a duel, which is kind of an unusual thing.
I've no record of him ever fighting a duel. I don't think that's correct. I think that's erroneous.
Well, you're just going to start accusing the quizmasters of getting the questions
Yeah,
wrong.
I am, yeah.
Is this
Yeah,
your
because
new-
they've got 2.
This is your new...
You've got the stupidly worded one about who was on our side in the Peninsular War.
Well, it wasn't stupidly worded.
No,
at all.
this one. Right, I tell you, it has to be Beaufort.
Beaufort?
Yes.
What, the Earl of Beaufort?
Earl of Beaufort.
Incorrect. It's the
Now
Earl
that I
of
discover the
Winchelsea.
truth, I'm
Earl
disposed
of
to
who?
beat you to death.
The Earl of Winchelsea.
Winchelsea.
Yeah, you know where that is, don't you? It's not on the Isle of Wight.
No,
That's in Kent.
I know it is.
Question number 10. Who succeeded Wellington when he stood down as Prime Minister in November 1830?
November 1830.
Yes.
That would have to have been. Let me think aloud. 1830. That would be Sir Robert Peel.
Incorrect.
No, it's not incorrect.
Now that I discover the truth, I'm disposed to beat you to death.
It was what?
It was the Earl Grey.
Earl Grey?
The Earl Grey.
The Earl Grey?
I think Sir Robert Peel was, in fact, in office before him, wasn't he?
No, he was in office after him.
Oh, was he?
1830.
Okay,
I think you got a load of very erroneous questions.
Not correct. No, in office from 22nd of January 1828 to 16th November 1830.
Yeah.
Succeeded by the Earl Grey.
No.
He was succeeded by Robert Peel when Robert Peel was Prime Minister when he was in the House of Lords. So you got that one wrong.
No.
So unless the Rye one is incorrect,
you
have got 3 out of 10.
That's rubbish.
As I predicted.
Rubbish questions.
Not rubbish questions.
I know so much about Wellington. You knew I know so much. I illustrated I knew so much.
No,
but once again,
you didn't even know the name of his horse's father's name.
I mean, yeah.
And you didn't even know who he was fighting against in the Peninsular War.
I did. If you'd have worded the question properly.
The question's
I said to you, the wars take place in Portugal. It was England, Portugal and Spain, right?
Well, yeah, but you didn't say it was Britain, actually. Portugal and Spain.
Yeah, okay, but he was representing England at the time.
Well, he was representing Britain, surely.
Well, England is in Britain, you oaf.
No, I know, but he was representing
what a stupid
Britain
question.
and Ireland, funnily enough.
Yeah, well, Ireland was part of us then. We owned Ireland altogether then.
Yeah, we are.
Exactly.
You're upset a few people in Ireland now.
Yeah.
3 out of 10.
No, I'm not, because
Absolutely
historically
shocking.
that was the situation
Shocking
at the time.
situation.
No,
For
it's
somebody
not.
who's
I know
meant to be an
loads of it.
expert.
And once again, a load of stupid questions.
Thank you very much
This
indeed.
quiz needs renovating.
You change it every week and you still complain.
No.
You changed it into Trivial Pursuit questions.
No.
You changed it into questions that can be set by
You wait
people
till we
outside.
get the response from the audience. They'll say, wow, Porky, you're a mine of information on Wellington. If only you've been asked some proper questions.
Yeah. Well, maybe you'd like to write your own questions.
The name of Wellington's horse's father is the most ridiculous and stupid question in a list of ridiculous and stupid questions we've ever had.
This is a sports station. We've got to try and keep sporting questions in it.
No.
This is Talk Sport.
Absolute disaster.
This is Talk Sport. We are the two mics. The adjudicators behind the glass have looked up the Rye situation, and apparently it is Rye East Sussex as opposed to Rye in the Isle of Wight.
No, he was known as in 1806 as the MP for the Isle of Wight. The Rye thing is
Rye is East Sussex, definitely. I've been to Rye. It's around the corner from Hastings.
But just look at the reaction here on people sending in messages. You know, it says here, Porky, you would have been better off answering question on the Dukes of Hazzard, complete gerrymandering. Another one here.
Dukes of Hazzard.
Another one here. Surprised the answer to the horse question after the clue wasn't given as bacon by Porky. Somebody here saying, I'm surprised MG didn't ask you the name of Wellington's dog's grandfather. Yeah. Those are the sort of questions. Father of a horse, what a ridiculous question.
One of the most famous
horses.
The
question should be void.
No, one of the most famous horses in the history of this country is Wellington's horse.
Yeah.
Right? There's a statue of Wellington's horse.
Look at this one. Vicky, thank you very much indeed. Outrageous. Porky stitched it once again. He said both Portugal and Spain in that answer, and you didn't even give him half a point.
No, because,
and that's absolutely right.
Because I asked for the Allied powers of which 3 countries.
Yeah, and the question was mumbled. You didn't.
Not at all.
You didn't say it properly.
How about this from Gerard?
Yeah.
Come on, Porky, stop stuttering.
No.
There's one. Stuart says, love the stalling tactics.
No.
Somebody else saying, where on earth are the second set of questions?
Yeah. JHA here says, Porky, you are a hive of knowledge. You're outdone again by sneaky tactics.
Not true.
Double questions, obviously.
Dennis says this, he's cheating.
Yeah.
That means he's watching. No, these are the comments from people who are watching the actual show, right? Who are watching you answering the questions, and they can see you looking down, and they can see.
What am I looking down at?
Well, you were looking down at the notes.
Rubbish. I have to study.
Are you saying you didn't have any notes?
Of course, I didn't have any notes.
Well, I took a picture of your notes before the quiz started.
Yeah, okay. And where are they now?
I don't know where they are.
They're not here.
They're probably hidden somewhere in your person.
No, they're not.
Somebody, Richard, says red rum. I think that was in answer to the question about the horse.
Yeah, you see, another load of nonsense. It really does get
Johnny
my
says,
goats.
thank God Porky has calmed down a bit. He's always going on about only half of his ticker working. If he carries on kicking off like he does, you could end up giving him mouth to mouth.
Somebody here says that they're listening to us by the podcast. So that's obviously from yesterday, while they feed their boys and girl triplets.
Excellent.
Just come home from hospital.
Blimey.
That's a guy called Just a Tweet. Well, congratulations.
Jan repeats what I told you earlier. Ryde is in the Isle of Wight and Rye is in East Sussex.
Yeah, but I mean,
not Kent.
But he was MP for the Isle of Wight. That's what he's most famously known for.
No, he's not.
He was.
MP for Rye. I'm telling you.
And, I get fed up of getting turned over like this
Andy
every
says,
week.
man up, Porky,
you and all
moaning old Pork. No, you don't get turned over every week.
I do, every week.
Only 2 weeks ago, you were going on about how well you'd done to get something like 5 out of 10.
No, I get turned over, and the conspiracy between you and these... Why have we never had the identity of the people who set the...
Because they must remain untouchable by any kind of form of corruption.
Because
of your history. Because of your history, you cannot be made known to these people.
So you can influence them, but I can't.
I don't influence them.
Oh, yes, you do.
Absolutely don't.
Oh, yes, you do.
No, all I do
I'm
is...
fed up to the back teeth with
all I do is I pass them the subject, which, by the way, you select every week.
Yeah.
You say to me, this is what I want to do a quiz on.
Yeah, and every week you get an
entire week to study.
Absolutely.
And you didn't even know the name of the horse's father. It's extraordinary.
Nobody in the world would know the name of the horse's father. Nobody in the world would know the answer to that.
I disagree.
You will go to Cambridge University and find the man who has more knowledge of the military history of Great Britain than anybody else, and he would not know the name of the horse's father. The most ridiculous question I've ever been asked.
Really? I think you've been asked a lot more ridiculous questions than that.
Oh, well, you asked them, so you would know,
I don't
wouldn't
write
you?
the questions.
Your level of ridicule just goes up and up every week.
I don't write the questions.
I'm going to get something done about
Beethoven's Opus 90, is it number 11 on Wellington? Is that what you said in here?
I said the Opus 90 was written as a tribute to him winning the Peninsular War.
What's that got to do with Wellington?
Wellington won the Peninsular Wars.
Yeah, no, I know, but why have you got Beethoven down as part of your notes?
What?
You've got Beethoven down as part of your notes.
Because Beethoven wrote it.
I know your notes.
Yes, they're my notes, yeah.
So where are they now?
Outside, where you took that picture of them. So
I took the picture inside.
No, this is another disgrace. You're taking a picture of my revision notes on Wellington.
Yes,
and
which is still in here.
And then you write the questions about subjects which are not on my revision notes.
Not true.
So this is gerrymandered. This is gerrymandered.
The picture was taken at 3:28.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Questions were delivered.
When you sneaked behind me as you went in and out of the studio.
Not true.
As I was making my final revisionary observations, which is perfectly acceptable and legal.
Shame you didn't get a question about Beethoven.
Yeah. Yeah,
Never mind.
I mean, honestly, it's disgusting and disgraceful behaviour.
Well,
and I'm going to change my whole approach to it.
Well, you change it every week. It doesn't make any difference.
No, I don't.
We've done Trivial Pursuit questions.
No.
We've done questions that only you pick. We've done subject matters that only you pick.
I'm not even listening.
Okay. Well, don't listen then.
What about this woman who writes for a Russian magazine?
Oh, yeah.
And is called Women in Manchester All Fat.
Yes, this is a Russian columnist, I believe, for a newspaper which I can find the name for you, I think, in a minute.
Yeah.
But she's upset quite a lot of people in Manchester.
Yeah, she has.
Because she's basically said that there's too many gay people in Manchester.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole gay section of Manchester, which I don't know why she didn't realise that before she went there.
Yes, that's right.
She says one of the reasons that all of these men are gay in Manchester is because the women are so ugly.
She says Russia's...
Shocking.
She says... the women are so fat they look disgusting to their men.
Yeah.
They eat so much fast food and potatoes, they drink beer from huge glasses, and the result is that there is gay debauchery in Manchester.
Yeah. This woman's name is Elisa Titsko.
Yes.
And she writes for something called Komsomolskaya Pravda.
That's right, yeah. Well, Pravda means of the state, doesn't it? You know.
Right.
Has caused fury in the city. Local young women don't mind when fat hangs down from their stomach, she says.
Shocking.
When they go to a club, they put on tight leggings and mini dresses, try and make themselves look smaller.
Yeah.
It's hardly possible that men turn gay. This is outrageous.
It really is, yeah.
Because girls are too fat and non-sexual, but it can influence it. This
is the woman in question who's written the piece, right?
Yeah.
I'm showing you a picture of her now. This is she's also being attacked by people saying this is an example of how bad the Russian views of the gay scenario is.
Yeah.
And why Russia should not go to the World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I can't say whether she's in the wrong part of Manchester or whether she's in the right part of Manchester, but there's a lot of pictures of her walking around Manchester.
Well, that's the Northern Quarter, I think, where there's a sort of gay enclave of
she
bars
says,
and
in one
things.
cafe there was a wedding of two rather big girls. One of them was wearing a bridal veil, the second had a black tie on. Their mothers and friends were sitting at the table with them.
Yes.
At the next table we saw a man in a skin mask who was sticking his tongue out of it when he wanted to lick the ear of his partner.
Yeah. Well, you know,
so
very
strange.
Yeah. I think that's it's outrageous. But there's a picture here of Comrade S. Elisa Titko. And I have to say, begrudgingly, she looks as though she's quite an attractive woman.
Well, it doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean anything, but what I'm saying is, I thought she might have written it because she is perhaps not attractive and was, running down people in other towns. I mean, I know Manchester very well. I used to live there and work there. I go there a lot, and football matches take place there. And you and I have done a couple of very successful shows there.
Very successful shows there, and I've had a thoroughly good time.
And I have to say, I've never met anybody in Manchester who's caused me a problem. And the ladies in Manchester are not fat. I think they're lovely.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Richard says this, a true gentleman acknowledges defeat with a good grace. Obviously, Porky is not a man who Britain could recall with pride.
Well, if it was a fair competition, I would acknowledge defeat with good grace. But 3 out of 10 is not defeat, not in a situation where not only now do I find out that there's a conspiracy between yourself and the people who set the questions, but you now go around photographing my research notes, right?
Yes.
Which is a despicable and disgusting thing to do. You then pass them to the people who write the questions, and they then ask me questions about things which I haven't revised on the subject. I think it's disgraceful.
As I've explained to you,
absolutely disgraceful.
The picture of your
You're
notes,
in trouble. You're in trouble.
The picture of your notes was taken at 3:28.
You know that your moral compass now is so far off alignment.
Yeah, well, I don't need any judgment on my morals from you, thanks very much. You are the lowest of the low when it comes to morals. You are a person who would absolutely think of nothing else but yourself in every situation.
You've lost the respect of any right-thinking person in the world, I'm telling you.
Well, Nico says this, I perceive a bit of moaning and blaming MG from Porky every time he gets a low grade. Do more research, Porky.
Rubbish.
Absolutely
you can't do more research if you know everything about your subject. I mean, how many people out there are going to empathise and sympathise with me? What was the name of the father of the Duke of Wellington's horse? What a ridiculous question.
Well, it's a very famous horse.
The father's not very famous at all.
Well, the father actually won the Derby.
The horse was pretty famous, Copenhagen.
Yeah, but Copenhagen's father won the Derby. I mean, if you knew anything about racehorsing, which you were supposed to do...
It wasn't a quiz about racehorses. It was a quiz about the Duke of Wellington.
Right.
Why didn't you ask me on what occasion did the Duke of Wellington and Lord Nelson meet? And I'd have told you.
Well, what occasion did they meet at?
They met once at the War Office in 1805 when the Duke of Wellington was a junior officer.
I see.
And Lord Nelson was already an eminent sailor and had already won the wars of Egypt and
when did they meet then?
Nice. They met at the War Office.
Yeah, what date, though?
1805.
1805, what date?
14th of July.
Oh, right.
They both went there to be assigned their new duties.
Okay.
And the Duke of Wellington
It's a very interesting question,
was a junior officer. It's a fascinating question.
I don't set the questions anyway.
Do you know why it's a fascinating question?
Why?
Because, you idiot, if you've asked me properly where was the Duke of Wellington buried, I'd have said he's entombed in St Paul's Cathedral.
That's correct.
In a plot next to...
I don't know.
Lord Nelson.
Not the horse.
No, you idiot.
Why have you got white trousers, dark tunic, and is it thespian boots?
Hessian made
boots.
of Hessian, his boots.
Yeah.
That was his apparel on the battlefield on the day of the Battle of Waterloo.
I see.
But prior to that, he'd never worn white trousers because he was the first military man ever to use camouflage as a weapon against the enemy.
Yeah, camouflage.
Well, the way they used to work in those days is the opposition enemy would look through their spyglass for the leader of the lot, and he's
sitting on a horse. He went, look, there's that horse whose dad won the Derby.
It's pathetic.
This is Talk Sport.
Pathetic. Your ambition?
Is it not
What's
more
your dream
foolish?
job?
My dream job?
Yeah. What's your dream job?
I don't really have a dream job.
So you got no ambition.
I have
Do you know why?
ambition.
You flatten your face, all the time.
Why?
You just stumble around in life until somebody comes along, gives you another crutch to lean on. You know what I mean?
Like what?
That's all you do. And then sometimes, you get a slight burst of energy, lasts about 5 days, and then boom, you're back into the routine of easy as she goes, steady as she goes.
So what's your
steady
what's
as she
your
goes
point?
could be your motive
You've
for life.
started off this show by insulting me now twice. I'm going to come over there in 1 second flat. If you don't shut up, I'm going to beat the hell out of you. Do you understand me?
Really?
Do you understand me?
That's the resort.
Do you understand me?
The resort of the villain.
Just say yes and we'll move on.
No, I'm not saying yes to anything.
Right. We'll have a long break here because I may need some time to slap him around.